𝐀𝐮𝐭𝐡𝐨𝐫 9. Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is part 1 of our story. If you like this what if story and want to see part 2, let me know in the comments below. Before we start, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video with your friends. Also, check the description for more great content and my playlist. This story was posted by SerratedSamurai on Wattpad. Now let's start. Izuku Yagi was dead. There was no doubt about that. 𝗏𝗏𝗡𝐿 watched as his son's lifeless body was carried away in an ambulance. The cast iron rail on which he had landed remained mostly intact, as Izuku's frail form lacked the momentum to cause significant damage. 𝗏𝗏𝗡𝐿 realized that due to his family's neglect, Izuku had been barely alive when he jumped. His usual smile faltered as he observed the paramedics working diligently, collecting what remained of his son. A hand slipped into his, and he felt his daughter curl into his chest, tears soaking his shirt. He wrapped his arms around her as her mother succumbed to despair. 𝐀𝐮𝐭𝐡𝐨𝐫 attempted to climb into the ambulance, but a male nurse gently held her back. He informed her that her son had not survived. 𝐀𝐮𝐭𝐡𝐨𝐫 fell to her knees, heartbroken as the ambulance drove away, taking her son to the morgue. Shoto, Bakugou, Katsumi, and Shoka watched in horror and sadness as Detective 𝐀𝐮𝐭𝐡𝐨𝐫 exited the building, holding an envelope. He handed it to Mr. Yagi and offered his condolences to the symbol of peace. 𝗏𝗏𝗡𝐿 thanked him before turning to his daughter and her friends, sighing heavily. He suggested they read the envelope at home while he lifted 𝐀𝐮𝐭𝐡𝐨𝐫 to her feet. 𝐀𝐮𝐭𝐡𝐨𝐫 struggled in 𝗏𝗏𝗡𝐿's grasp, desperately reaching for the ambulance. She cried out for her son, trying to use her telekinesis to break free, scratching and biting like a cornered animal. Tears streamed down her face as she watched the ambulance leave and the crowd disperse. Izuku woke up, feeling rested but uncomfortable in a large, stiff bed. He slowly opened his eyes and found himself in a dark, cold bedroom. Sitting up, he felt warmth from the sun behind him as he surveyed the room filled with horns, weapons, and various types of furniture. Footsteps interrupted his thoughts as he climbed out of bed, the chilly air biting at his skin. He pushed the blanket aside and set his feet down, the cold wood flooring jolting him awake. The floor creaked loudly as he tiptoed toward a mirror. To his amazement, his scars were gone. The wound from where Bakugou had blasted him into a tree, which had caused him significant pain and a persistent cough, was no longer there. He had once asked his mother, 𝐀𝐮𝐭𝐡𝐨𝐫, to take him to a doctor, but she had ignored him, preoccupied with his sister's needs. Feeling around his body, he was surprised to find smooth skin where large blemishes had once been. He touched his face, checking for any signs of fever, and noticed that his corneas were no longer visible. His eyes appeared blank, yet he could see perfectly well. He waved a hand in front of his face, observing the movement clearly. Searching the room for a magnifying glass, he discovered a cache of weapons mounted on the wall beside his bed. He approached them, admiring their craftsmanship. He had often thought about creating weapons for himself as a hero, even attempting to make a knife from a screwdriver once, which had ended poorly when his sister had attacked him with it. Suddenly, a voice startled him, causing him to instinctively grab a sword from the wall and aim it at the source. He found himself facing a girl who looked entirely ordinary. She commented on his reaction, suggesting that she would avoid sneaking up on him in the future. He apologized, thinking she was someone else, as he lowered his sword. She introduced herself as Rosemary, though everyone called her Bruja, and extended her hand. He replied that he was Izuku, but most referred to him as Deku. She found it cute and asked what it meant. He hesitated, then revealed that it meant useless, a nickname given to him by friends due to his lack of a quirk. She looked puzzled and asked what a quirk was. When he expressed surprise that she didn't know, she turned away to grab a tray of food from a desk. He then asked her about his eyes, uncovering them. She turned back, startled, and dropped the tray, kneeling in shock. 2 days later in Mizudafu, the Yagi, Todoroki, Bakugou families, and their friends gathered in the Yagi living room, anxiously awaiting 𝗏𝗏𝗡𝐿 to read Izuku's note. Masaru observed his daughter, concerned about her unusual behavior in recent days, especially after Izuku's passing. Suddenly, Nizu cleared his throat, prompting everyone to focus on the note, curious about the circumstances surrounding Izuku's death. 𝐀𝐮𝐭𝐡𝐨𝐫 had his suspicions but sought confirmation. He noted Katsuki Bakugou's anxious demeanor, always glancing around as if haunted by guilt. Katsuki seemed remorseful, but it felt like a mask to hide his true feelings. His sister, Katsumi, appeared to be struggling with her own issues, often snapping unexpectedly. Shoto and Shoka were isolating themselves, leaving Izumi as the only one still connected to the group. Impatient with Tashinori's hesitation, Aizawa took the note, and the room fell silent as he opened the envelope. A letter slipped out, and as he unfolded it, tears filled his eyes. The letter expressed deep pain and betrayal. Izuku questioned why he was never considered good enough, lamenting the neglect he felt from his family due to his lack of a quirk. He remembered the absence of support during his childhood, contrasting it with the attention given to Izumi. He accused Izumi of bullying him into giving up on his dreams of being a hero, and he felt abandoned by Tashinori, who had once been quirkless himself but had now passed on a powerful quirk to Izumi, whom he viewed as his tormentor. The Yagis listened in silence as Tashinori and 𝐀𝐮𝐭𝐡𝐨𝐫 broke down in tears, overwhelmed by the harsh words. 𝐀𝐮𝐭𝐡𝐨𝐫 cried out in disbelief, while Izumi expressed her anguish only to be interrupted by 𝐀𝐮𝐭𝐡𝐨𝐫, who chastised her for her actions. Tension escalated as Mitsuki confronted 𝐀𝐮𝐭𝐡𝐨𝐫, expressing her anger towards the Yagis for their treatment of Izuku. Aizawa, trying to maintain order, urged everyone to let him finish reading. The letter continued, revealing Izuku's feelings of betrayal by Shoto and Shoka, who he believed had turned their backs on him during his time of need. Enji, witnessing the fallout, confronted his children, demanding to know what they had been thinking as the weight of their actions hung heavily in the air. The tension in the room was palpable as the adults stared at Bakugou, who felt the weight of their gazes. He slowly looked up to see tears in the eyes of his mother and sister. Suddenly, a sharp slap brought him back to reality, and he found himself facing the furious expression of his father. Masaru's voice thundered through the air as he lifted Bakugou by the collar, his anger boiling over. In the midst of the chaos, Aizawa read through the troubling letter, his shock growing with each line. He approached 𝐀𝐮𝐴, pointing out the disturbing content aimed at Katsumi. 𝐀𝐮𝐴's reaction was immediate. He turned pale and staggered back, overwhelmed by the revelations. The adults in the room exchanged horrified glances, each sentence of the letter revealing a deeper level of distress. Katsumi, feeling cornered, was confronted by her mother, who pleaded for the truth. As the atmosphere thickened with accusations, 𝐀𝐮𝐭𝐡𝐨𝐫's voice rose in disbelief, demanding answers. The tension escalated as Shoto, confused, sought clarity on the unfolding situation. Meanwhile, Izuku, unaware of the turmoil, found himself in a peculiar situation. He tapped Bruha's head gently, checking if she was all right. She responded with an apology, acknowledging his return. Izuku, still in the dark, asked for context, and Bruha smiled, leading him toward the door. In the kitchen, the older woman recognized Izuku instantly, her excitement palpable as she spun him around, eager to contact others about his return. At Yagi house in Mizudafu, the atmosphere was thick with accusations. Katsumi vehemently denied the claims against her, but 𝐀𝐮𝐴's conclusion was firm. He stated that due to the troubling messages in Izuku's letters, certain individuals were deemed unfit for hero society. Izumi, desperate, pleaded for leniency, but the situation was dire. Masaru, who had been planning to handle matters privately, revealed a significant discovery. He had found something in Katsumi's desk that sent shockwaves through the room. As he unveiled a positive 𝗬𝗪 test, the reactions were immediate and intense. 𝐀𝐮𝐭𝐡𝐨𝐫 fainted, Tashinori gasped, Mitsuki broke down in tears, and Bakugou's rage ignited further. In another realm, Izuku sat blindfolded, surrounded by voices discussing his fate. He felt the urge to remove the blindfold but was instructed to wait. As the warden arrived, the atmosphere shifted, and Hilda gently told Izuku he could uncover his eyes. When he did, the shocked gasps of the room echoed around him, revealing the unsettling appearances of those present. Bruha took his hand, introducing him to the Nameless One, the King of the Dead, setting the stage for an encounter that would change everything. "It is an honor, my lord," the skeletal man said, leaning on one knee. He towered at roughly 2.5 meters tall, an intimidating figure, so it came as a surprise when he knelt. Izuku quietly asked about the kneeling, not wanting to offend the giant. The skeleton responded, questioning if his lord preferred him not to kneel. Izuku reassured him that he didn't have to, as he wasn't that formal. 𝐴𝐵 then guided Izuku to the man sitting next to him. "This is my father, 𝐼𝐼. He's the one who found you and is the current chief of the Pillager Tribe Union." Izuku extended his hand, and the older man took it. "Thank you, Mr. 𝐼𝐼," Izuku smiled. "I am at your command, young Izuku," the elder replied with a smile. "If there is anything I can do for you, let me know, okay?" 𝐵 introduced Izuku to the warden, a creature of immense size. Izuku had never seen anyone as large as this being. While the nameless one was taller than him, the warden was easily twice his height. 𝐵 mentioned that the warden didn't talk much as the giant affectionately patted Izuku on the head. Izuku smiled shyly as the behemoth rubbed his hand over his fluffy green hair. Next, 𝐵 introduced Charlotte, the queen of the creepers. She curtsied and greeted Izuku, who returned the sentiment. Curious, he asked about the bomb she carried. 𝐵 explained it was a creeper thing, and when Izuku inquired further about what a creeper was, 𝐵 promised to explain later. Izuku flinched as 𝐵 approached a giant spider. "I am 𝐀𝐮𝐬𝐫, king of the spiders, young Izuku," the spider said, its mandibles clicking. Izuku struggled to find the right words. "It's a very, nice," he began, but 𝐀𝐮𝐬𝐫 sensed his fear and offered him an exit. Grateful, Izuku mumbled his thanks as he stepped away. 𝐵 then led him to another guest, a creature resembling a boar. "Izuku, this is Razorback, a piglin brute," she introduced. Razorback extended his hand, and Izuku took it, only to be pulled into a strong hug. "Okay, that's enough of the..." Izuku returned the embrace, feeling a warmth he hadn't experienced in a long time. "I'm Slippy," the tuxedo-wearing slime introduced himself. Izuku shook his hand but flinched when he accidentally squeezed too hard, feeling the cold slime between his fingers. "Sorry," he exclaimed, not realizing he wasn't at fault. Slippy reassured him that it was fine, and then 𝐵 introduced Andros, an Enderman. She leaned in to whisper a warning not to look him directly in the eyes. As Izuku stepped forward, he greeted Andros while carefully avoiding his gaze. The towering figure spoke in a strange manner, and Izuku quickly wrote down what he had heard, smiling as he realized Andros spoke backwards. The Enderman was pleased that someone had finally figured it out, surprising everyone around. Izuku shared his thoughts on the Overworld, expressing that it was much better than his old world. When 𝐵 asked why, he hesitated, mumbling. Razorback suggested they start from the beginning. Izuku sighed as the attention turned to him, revealing he had fallen from the sky while trying to escape his pain. The group gasped in shock, and Hilda's eyes filled with tears as she asked why. Izuku recounted the neglect, abuse, and torment he had endured, each word stirring deep emotions within the leaders. Anger, sorrow, and empathy welled up inside them, and they all silently agreed that if they ever encountered the villains from Izuku's past, they would ensure justice was served. Izuku stared at the sword in his hand, purple mist emanating from the blade. He was in the war room of his new mansion, plotting. Days had passed since his arrival, and he had been briefed on the player's situation. A lone zombie approached him, holding a tray of pastries. "Breakfast is served, sir," the zombie said, his speech muffled. "Thank you, 𝐀𝐮𝐭𝐡𝐨𝐫," Izuku replied, taking a cinnamon roll and biting into it. He pulled a book from the table, checking the stats on his colonies. The undead made up 20% of his 1 million mobs. As he studied the player's stronghold, he devised a plan. "𝐵, gather the others. I have an idea." Izuku had always possessed a strategic mindset. In his youth, he played chess with Nizu and Uncle Mirai, often winning by deciphering their strategies. In a flashback, Izuku recalled a game against Nizu, where he declared checkmate with a confident move. Nizu praised his skills, and 𝐴𝐻𝐼𝐿, entering the room, nodded in acknowledgement of his son's talent. As the memory faded, Izuku felt a tear escape as he thought of his real family and wondered how they felt about his absence. Did they miss him? Were they relieved he was gone? Overwhelmed, he began to sob into his hands. Bruja rushed in, comforting him and assuring him that she was there now. In the UA principal's office, 𝐀𝐮𝐬𝐴 looked at his colleagues with a heavy heart. He had difficult news to share. I know this is not good news, but it needs to be said. Izumi, the Todoroki twins, and the Bakugou twins are unfit for a hero school. The rest of the UA staff agreed, unwilling to associate with those they deemed unworthy. 𝐀𝐮𝐬𝐴 continued, but the mention of the Hero Commission elicited groans from the room. The Hero Commission recognized significant potential in the children. Enji expressed his disappointment, stating that they were not going to hero school and that was final. Mitsuki added that even if they were somehow allowed to enter, Katsumi could not attend because she was 𝗧𝗏𝗏 and was restricted from being within 500 meters of any school. Masaru nodded, not wanting to upset his wife further. Hisashi pointed out that Toshinori and Inko had been persistent in allowing Izumu to continue her education, despite Izuku's notes indicating that his bullies were not suited for hero society. Due to All Might's status as the symbol of peace and the Hurricane of Terror's position as number 4, Izumi still had a strong chance of admission, regardless of their opinions. 𝐀𝐮𝐬𝐴 suddenly perked up, recalling the surveillance footage. He suggested they obtain recordings of the bullies' behavior from Aldra to hold them accountable for Izuku's neglect. He then reached into his pocket and pulled out a set of keys, hopping out of his seat to approach a locked filing cabinet. The others gathered around as he opened the bottom drawer, revealing a collection of items he had expelled students for, including weapons and pranks. He chuckled at the memory of a student attempting to smuggle uranium for a giant death ray, recalling how that incident led to the end of science fairs. Meanwhile, with the Yagis and the twins, Inko firmly declared that under no circumstances would Katsumi have an apron. Inko, filled with anger, reprimanded Katsumi harshly, emphasizing that she was holding the last connection to Izuku. She insisted that the only way to honor Izuku was to ensure his child had a better childhood than he did. Inko warned Katsumi that if anything happened to the child, she would take drastic measures. Katsumi nodded in understanding. Back with Izuku, he pointed at the player fortress on the map, questioning how the players obtained their resources. 𝗧𝗏𝗏 informed him that the villages were the source, and Andros added that trade routes facilitated the movement of those resources. Izuku began tracing the trade routes with a red pencil, devising a plan to cut them off and trap the players. He noted that with winter just ending, the players would be low on resources. By intercepting the merchants before they could return, the fortress defenders would be forced to venture out in search of new trade routes. Izuku explained that by hiding half of their soldiers in the wilds, they could eliminate the fortress defenders with minimal effort. Murloc pointed out the risk of the players attacking them, but Izuku reassured him that they would leave half of their army to guard against that. He drew a bright red line along a row of pillager outposts and discussed their strategy for the villages. They would raid the villages, taking hostages and turning the fallen into zombies, while bringing the survivors to their kingdom as economic assets. Izuku then calculated the distance to the fortress, considering how to approach discreetly. Murloc provided the ratio for distance between the Overworld and Nether, and Izuku quickly worked out the logistics for their march. He suggested sending troops in waves leading up to the attack to avoid alerting the players. He inquired about any upcoming storms, and the Nameless One confirmed that a severe storm was expected soon. Izuku planned to use the storm to make their destruction appear natural, focusing on burning and collapsing structures without drawing attention. He decided to leave certain trade routes open to avoid suspicion, allowing for a steady flow of players to target. The other leaders applauded Izuku's tactical thinking as they regained control of their strategy. 3 years had passed since Izuku arrived in the Overworld. During that time, he had successfully overthrown the players, securing the loyalty of his kingdom and people. His strategic knowledge had been crucial in defeating the players' leader, a man in green wearing a ceramic mask. After their defeat, Izuku facilitated scientific advancements, transforming the Herobrine kingdom from the early Iron Age to the early 20th century. Aware that the players would eventually return, he prepared for their resurgence. Zombies and pillagers, once armed with basic weapons, were now equipped with modern firearms. From his balcony, Izuku observed his soldiers practicing their marksmanship while sipping hot cocoa, waiting for 𝐻𝗧𝗧𝗟𝗃 and 𝗏𝗏𝗏 to wake up. He understood their fatigue after the previous night, as he too was troubled by flashbacks. In one such flashback, Izuku recalled leading a charge against the player's fortress, accompanied by skeleton horsemen and other mobs. They laid siege to the village, causing chaos as players fled and the guard tower caught fire. Snapping back to the present, Izuku felt someone jump onto his back and recognized it was 𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏, who playfully pouted and asked how he knew it was her. 𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏 was notoriously difficult to wake up in the morning, and she was the only person Izuku knew who would start flirting right away. She smiled as he kissed her and asked what they were going to do that day. He mentioned he might check on his family. When she inquired whether it would be the good ones or the other ones, he replied that the other ones had never been his family. Meanwhile, Izumi felt her heart ache as she sat in her assigned seat on the bus across from Aizawa. Shoka sat next to her, and the rest of Izuku's bullies were not supposed to leave the teacher's sight. The students of Class 1A typically avoided her and her friends, as they were technically in general education. Tsu called out to Yagi, noting that his quirk was similar to both All Mights and the Hurricane of Terrors, asking if they were related. Izumi smiled and confirmed they were her parents. Tsu then asked about Izuku's twin, which surprised Izumi, as only the UA staff and her friends knew about him. Tsu mentioned that both Bakugou and Todoroki had twins, prompting tears to well in Izumi's eyes. Bakugou stood up, furious, and shouted at Tsu to be quiet, threatening her if she spoke to Izumi like that again. Just then, a scarf wrapped around Bakugou's mouth and throat, restraining him as he struggled. Aizawa informed the students that they had arrived, holding Izumi and her friends back. He warned them that the truth would come out eventually and questioned how the class would react upon discovering that a group of villains had been among them for a month. Bakugou was about to retort, but Izumi covered his mouth, pleading with Aizawa. Aizawa insisted on being addressed as sensei, and Izumi argued that once the others saw their changes, they would accept them. The group exited the bus and joined the rest of the class. Denki pointed out that they looked like fake villains, prompting Aizawa to quickly get into a defensive stance and instruct the students to get back onto the bus. Bakugou charged at the villains, with Kirishima following closely behind. The leader of the villains pointed at them, nudging a man made of black mist, who opened a portal that sent Bakugou and Kirishima away. As chaos erupted, various portals began stinging the students while the villains rushed Aizawa. He managed to grab a stout green villain with horns, slamming him into another villain resembling a ghost. Aizawa swung his scarf at a villain covered in hands, blocking a strike before punching him in the face. The villain introduced himself as Shigaraki Tamura, declaring his intent to kill the symbol of peace. Izumi shouted that he wouldn't hurt her father, tackling Tamura, who then flung her away with a large black hand. As Shigaraki approached Aizawa, the teacher prepared his scarf, staring intently at the villain. Shigaraki tackled Aizawa, attempting to disintegrate his arms, but Aizawa made eye contact with him and narrowly avoided the attack. Shigaraki expressed regret over their confrontation, but a voice interrupted, and a large hand wrapped around Shigaraki's neck, flinging him across the area. A hand reached out to Aizawa, and he took it, looking up to see his savior's blank white eyes. Izuku had been watching over his real family during his absence, using the power of the command block to summon an enchanted map that allowed him to see them at all times. When he witnessed the danger his uncle faced, he knew it was time to intervene. Herobrine held Aizawa as they both faced the villains. Suddenly, a large, bird-faced humanoid emerged from the crowd, with Shigaraki following behind. Shigaraki questioned who Herobrine was, to which Herobrine confidently declared himself the final boss. Herobrine stared down the bird-like creature as Shigaraki commanded it to attack. As the creature charged, Herobrine swiftly pulled out his sword and vanished in a cloud of dust, only to reappear with a crossbow. He fired at the creature, hitting it in a critical spot. Shigaraki shouted that the creature had regeneration and commanded it to attack again, but it remained still. Herobrine charged Shigaraki, knocking him out with a swift blow. Villains surrounded him, but he was ready. He caught a villain's fist and crushed it before dealing with another, kicking him back with enough force to send him crashing into a third villain. A chameleon-headed villain attempted to attack, but Herobrine caught and tore off its tongue. Another villain tried to tackle him from behind, but he flipped her over, neutralizing her threat. Charlotte watched as Izuku took down the villains with precision, using one as a shield against another's attack. He drew his sword, parrying a strike before slashing through the villain's weapon, causing it to shatter. The defeated villain fell to the ground. Another villain with guns for fingers opened fire, but Herobrine used his shield to block the shots, swiftly eliminating the attacker. As the battle raged on, Charlotte contemplated the immense pressure Izuku faced in that moment. Suddenly, the Mist Man opened a portal, revealing an army of villains. Herobrine surveyed the scene before summoning his horn. He raised it to his mouth and blew, sending forth a war cry to call for reinforcements. Though he felt energized, he deemed these underlings unworthy of his attention. Before the villains could react, several shots rang out as Reaper opened fire with his auto rifle, taking down multiple foes. Tsu warned her companions that the villains were gaining ground as aquatic adversaries climbed onto the ship. She, Izumi, and Mineta had been stranded there after the Mist Man's teleportation. A shark villain taunted them as he boarded the deck, followed by others. Suddenly, one villain was pulled underwater, prompting confusion among the rest. A large spear shot up from the depths, striking the villain. The three students watched in shock as the water turned crimson. Tsu asked Izumi if she could use her telekinesis to help them escape. Izumi nodded and lifted Tsu and Mineta into the air. Mineta was about to volunteer to carry Izumi when Tsu used her tongue to pull Izumi along. Soon, the trio floated to safety. 𝐀𝐮𝐭𝐡𝐨𝐫, furious, commanded his fellow villains to pursue them as he leaped over the side. The remaining villains dove into the water, ignoring the chaos. 𝐀𝐮𝐭𝐡𝐨𝐫 sensed vibrations beneath him when a heavy object struck his stomach, causing him to lose his composure. He turned to see a group of dolphins and blue-green men engaging his allies. One of them approached him with a knife drawn, while the dolphin that had rammed into him held him by the arm. In the landslide zone, Shoto and Shoka faced a horde of villains. As they rushed toward them, Shoto created a barrier of ice while Shoka fought back. Shoka urged Shoto to use his fire, but he resisted, caught up in his personal grudge. When a villain tackled Shoka from behind, Shoto sent a wave of ice toward them, accidentally freezing his sister. Shoka melted the ice while glaring at him, demanding he use his fire. Shoto continued to freeze more villains, but when a foe approached from behind, he was tackled by a masked villain wielding a knife. Just as the villain seemed to have the upper hand, a large blue spider appeared, sinking its fangs into him. More spiders emerged from the rubble, attacking the villains. A larger black spider moved through the chaos, dragging web-wrapped foes behind it. In the mountain zone, Denki, Jiru, and Momo found themselves cornered by a large villain in a metal mask. After defeating him, they noticed more villains closing in. Jiru kicked the post supporting the bridge, and Momo summoned a knife to cut the ropes. The bridge collapsed, sending the pursuing villains tumbling down. Some managed to grab on, but others fell into the ravine below. The surviving villains attempted to climb back up, unaware of the danger that awaited them. Blaster prepared to detonate when the students cut the bridge. He noticed the villains climbing up and watched as one of them angrily confronted him. Just then, Blaster summoned his totem of undying and detonated. The explosion sent rocks tumbling down, burying the villains beneath the debris. In the conflagration zone, Ojiro, Ida, and Shinso were slowly being overwhelmed. For every villain they took down, more took their place. Ojiro urged Ida to seek help, but Ida insisted on following Izumi's instructions. Shinso tightened his capture scarf around a villain's legs. Just then, a bright blue villain struck Ida from behind. Ojiro managed to counterattack, but a dog-like villain tackled him. Suddenly, a gunshot rang out, and the villain fell. A pig-like figure emerged from the flames, armed and ready to fight. More pigmen joined the fray, opening fire on the villains. The leader, a broad-shouldered figure in a black tunic, led the charge as bullets flew through the air. In the windstorm zone, Koda and Tokoyami stared in horror at the advancing villains. As a knight approached, Koda pushed Tokoyami out of the way and ducked under the blade. He called upon the animals as dark shadows seized the knight's arms, ready to turn the tide of battle. 𝐻𝐻𝐽 was instructed by 𝐻𝐻𝐽𝐬𝐵 to take action against the villain. The bald boy delivered a swift kick, but the villain merely taunted him, dismissing the attack. 𝐻𝐻𝐽𝐬𝐵 winced as he felt the impact against the villain's armor. Suddenly, a red-eyed white rabbit leaped into the fray, launching itself at the villain's throat. The man let out a scream as the rabbit burrowed in, before bouncing off to strike another villain, causing her to gasp for breath. The relentless rabbit then targeted a third villain, attacking him fiercely. A villain with a cannon for an arm attempted to intervene, but the rabbit deftly dodged the cannonball aimed at its ally, tackling the cannon-wielding villain instead. The chaos continued as more villains approached, only to be taken down one by the agile creature. 𝐻𝐻𝐽𝐬𝐵 and 𝐻𝐻𝐽𝐬𝐵 observed in disbelief as the once numerous villains were swiftly defeated by the fierce rabbit. 𝐻𝐻𝐽𝐬𝐵 felt overwhelmed and had to step away, while 𝐻𝐻𝐽𝐬𝐵 offered him a reassuring pat on the back. In another part of the ruins, Kirishima watched as Bakugou confronted a villain, grabbing him by the head and unleashing a powerful explosion. Kirishima questioned Bakugou's methods, but Bakugou was undeterred, declaring that the villains were his to handle. He continued his assault, breaking bones and causing destruction around him. The ground shook as Bakugou unleashed a devastating attack, sending debris crashing down on the villains. One villain, caught in the chaos, was blinded by the dust. Bakugou approached another villain who was pleading for mercy, but he showed no hesitation, delivering a final blow. Kirishima could only watch, feeling a mix of awe and concern for his friend's ruthless approach. Meanwhile, 𝐾𝐮𝐭𝐡𝐨𝐫 visited the Bakugou household with her granddaughter, Hanako. The baby was puzzled by the concept of peekaboo, shaking her tiny fist in confusion. 𝐾𝐮𝐭𝐡𝐨𝐫 noticed that Hanako seemed unusually solemn for her age and handed her an all-might plush toy, which made a loud, cheerful noise. The sudden sound startled Hanako, causing her to cry, much to 𝐾𝐮𝐭𝐡𝐨𝐫's dismay. 𝐾𝐮𝐭𝐡𝐨𝐫 expressed her worries to Masaru and Mitsuki, feeling that Hanako might not like them. As they made their way to Hanako's room for a nap, Mitsuki noticed a picture on the wall, a memorial painting for Izuku, which Masaru had refused to display in their home. 𝐾𝐮𝐭𝐡𝐨𝐫 showed the painting to Hanako, who reached out towards it, unaware that the eyes of the painting glowed momentarily. In a chaotic scene, Shigaraki found himself surrounded by a horde of menacing figures. He narrowly avoided an attack but was struck in the leg by a bullet, causing him to fall. As he struggled, a zombie soldier attacked him, but Shigaraki's allies fell one by one to the advancing horde. Despite their efforts, the zombies overwhelmed them. Shigaraki called for help, but his companions were preoccupied. Kurogiri managed to create a portal, pulling Shigaraki to safety as they escaped the relentless assault. Amidst the turmoil, All Might burst onto the scene, surveying the aftermath of the battle. The sight of fallen villains shocked him, and he quickly learned from Izumi and Bakugou that the remaining villains were being targeted. As heroes rushed to the scene, a confrontation began with a mysterious figure named Herobrine, who introduced himself as the king of the overworld. Tensions escalated when Bakugou charged at Herobrine, but All Might intervened, preventing further conflict. Herobrine, unfazed by the chaos, requested a meeting with Nizu to discuss the situation, and Nizu cautiously agreed, hoping for a peaceful resolution. Nizu glanced at the gun-toting zombies and remarked that the last thing they wanted was to provoke the man with all the arms pointed at them. All Might helped Bakugou off the ground while Izumi and the Todoroki twins observed. Izumi expressed her concern about the white-eyed man conversing with Nizu, stating that she didn't trust him. Bakugou stirred at the mention of his name, and Shoka scrutinized the white-eyed man, noting his tall, tan figure, blank eyes and brown hair, which made him somewhat resemble Izuku. She concluded that he might be Izuku, but had been transported to another world. Shoto dismissed her theory, recalling how she had previously suggested that birds were government surveillance tools. In Nizu's office, the conversation continued with Herobrine, who claimed to be the king of the overworld. Nizu acknowledged the situation, noting that Bakugou's attack was regrettable but warned that any further incidents could lead to serious consequences. Herobrine explained that his world had been observing theirs for some time and believed that saving the next generation of heroes would be a good start to their relationship. 𝐀𝐮𝐭𝐡𝐨𝐫 recalled the footage from the USJ, where a young hero had already taken down several villains before help arrived. Detective 𝐬𝐮𝐭𝐡𝐨 and SerratedSamurai entered the office, and 𝐁𝐮𝐭𝐡𝐨 introduced Herobrine to them. 𝐬𝐮𝐭𝐡𝐨 inquired about Herobrine's status as a king, and the conversation shifted to the power of Herobrine's country, which boasted an impressive economy and a vast army. 𝐁𝐮𝐴 was taken aback by the size of the army, and 𝐬𝐮𝐭𝐡𝐨 simply nodded, acknowledging the gravity of the situation. In a flashback, SerratedSamurai attended Izuku's funeral, feeling the weight of regret for not being there for his nephew. As he knelt beside Izuku's casket, he experienced a vision of destruction, seeing 𝐀𝐮𝐴 engulfed in flames and various creatures wreaking havoc. The vision revealed the consequences of complacency and corruption, with a warning that the world would face punishment for its actions. In the present, SerratedSamurai focused on Herobrine, seeking confirmation of his identity. Herobrine admitted that he was indeed Izuku, transformed into this new being. Emotions surged as SerratedSamurai embraced his long-lost nephew, expressing his sorrow for not being there. Herobrine reassured him, stating that he had become who he was meant to be, leaving behind his past self. 𝐬𝐮𝐭𝐡𝐨, still processing the revelation, asked how Herobrine had overcome his quirk. Herobrine explained that while Izuku had died, he had emerged as Herobrine, a hero without a quirk, embodying his true self. "There's fine." One character asked what the other had been up to since their absence. The response was to grab a seat, as it was a long story. Aizawa sighed as All Might and the Hurricane of Terror fussed over their daughter and her friends, leaving the other students out of their circle. Mike took a seat next to him, and the tired teacher sipped from his favorite cat mug. Mike mentioned that Koda and Tokoyami needed therapy after witnessing the unsettling scene with the rabbit, and Yaoyorozu, Kyoka, and Kaminari needed it too. He pulled a flask from his coat and handed it to Aizawa, who groaned as he poured the contents into his mug. Suddenly, the door of room 1A swung open, and a lead zombie entered, causing the students to tense up. The creature shuffled over to Aizawa and Mike, the scent of decay lingering in the air. The zombie asked if Aizawa was indeed Eraserhead and placed a pair of yellow goggles on the teacher's desk. Aizawa, reaching for the emergency button under his desk, inquired about the zombie's intentions. The zombie replied that he was simply returning something. All Might intervened, asking who or what the group was and where they had come from, while Izumi held back. The zombie adjusted his sunglasses and dismissed her question, stating he was just there to return the goggles. Inko held Bakugou in place as the loudspeaker crackled to life, announcing that Mr. Bub was needed in the principal's office. As the zombie left, Kaminari remarked that he was in trouble. Inko then informed the students that due to the villain attack disrupting their schedule, they would take the rest of the week off to prepare for the sports festival. The students cheered and quickly gathered their belongings to leave the room. All Might held Bakugou back, whispering that they would have a long talk. Outside, Charlotte, Reaper, Jeff, Blaster, Goliath, and 𝐀𝐮𝐭𝐡𝐴 waited for their leader on the steps of the building. Reaper polished his rifle's scope while adjusting his helmet to shield himself from the sun. Jeff had fallen asleep, taking up a significant amount of space. Blaster kicked a ball back and forth, struggling to catch it without hands, while 𝐀𝐮𝐭𝐡𝐴 and Goliath discussed silverfish. Charlotte listened to music on her device when someone shouted for them to stay away. One of the newcomers, a woman with rabbit ears and white hair, approached them aggressively, attempting to kick Reaper. He surrendered, dropping his weapon, while Charlotte tried to explain that they were not villains but were waiting for their leader, who was meeting with Mr. 𝐁𝐮𝐴. A large man with a flaming mustache held back the others, confirming their story based on a message he received. A man in chrome knight armor approached and bowed respectfully, thanking them for saving his brother and apologizing for the misunderstanding. The flaming man introduced himself as Enji Todoroki, also known as Endeavor, along with his son Tuya and his girlfriend Mo. They expressed their gratitude for saving their siblings and the other children. Charlotte attempted to introduce the rest of Herobrine's group when a man in a black bodysuit and wooden mask interrupted, announcing that they were under arrest for various charges. Heroes Kamui Woods, 𝐴𝐻𝐿ady, Death Arms, Miruko, and Uwabami blended into the crowd of concerned parents. As they approached the group they were sent to apprehend. 𝐀𝐮𝐭𝐡𝐨𝐫 approached the blonde girl, urging her to comply peacefully. 𝐒𝐿𝐵 attempted to cuff Charlotte, but Charlotte resisted, prompting 𝐒𝐿𝐵 to tackle her while pulling a snake from her hair. Death Arms intervened, warning everyone to stay still to avoid any harm. Charlotte cried out as the Hero Commission's agents moved to apprehend Herobrine's group. Endeavor shouted in confusion, trying to defuse the situation, while a tall boy with glasses insisted that they had been helped. The atmosphere grew tense as most of the group found themselves frozen in place, unable to move. Meanwhile, Herobrine sat in contemplation, grappling with the revelations he had just received. He had neglected to investigate Katsumi and the others who had tormented him, unable to face them after their actions. Overwhelmed by emotions, he struggled to articulate his feelings, his trauma surfacing as tears threatened to spill. Nizu offered him a box of tissues, while Night Eye displayed pictures of Hanako on Hero Book. Herobrine's heart raced as he examined the images, one in particular igniting a surge of anger within him. He darkly chuckled at the name associated with the post, setting the phone down with gritted teeth. Tsukachi entered, handing Herobrine a bottle of water, while Bub stood behind him, offering comfort. Herobrine nodded, slowly calming down as Night Eye reassured him that things would be alright, mentioning that Katsuki would likely face consequences for his actions. Suddenly, Nizu's phone rang, alerting him to a situation at the gates. He quickly informed Herobrine that some heroes were attempting to arrest his associates, and that parents had also arrived. As they made their way to the gates, Herobrine spotted the heroes who had mishandled a previous incident, along with others trying to maintain order. He observed as 𝐒𝐿𝐵 tackled his companion, and in response, he unleashed a wave of bad omens 𝐶CLV over the area, demanding to know what was happening. At the HPSC headquarters, the commission president analyzed a video on her computer, focusing on a particular boy. She instructed her assistant to send an email regarding Katsuki Bakugou, recognizing his potential as a replacement for Lady Nagant due to his aggressive history. The chairman discussed his capabilities, speculating on how far he might go to advance his position. Herobrine confronted 𝐒𝐿𝐵, who had pinned his queen down. He descended the stairs and forcefully removed her from his companion, lifting the crowd's paralysis. 𝐀𝐮𝐭𝐡𝐨𝐫 approached, attempting to ensnare Herobrine, but the king retaliated with a surge of electricity, causing 𝐀𝐮𝐭𝐡𝐨𝐫 to scream in alarm. Present Mike intervened, urging everyone to calm down as Nizu climbed onto Aizawa's shoulders to address the situation. He introduced Herobrine and his companions as distinguished guests, prompting the heroes to slowly back away. Miruko protested, insisting that they could have arrested the villains, but Herobrine challenged her to explain how they would have executed a rescue mission against a heavily fortified stronghold filled with armed criminals. He pointed out the impracticality of their plan, emphasizing the danger posed by the villains who would stop at nothing to harm the next generation of heroes. Herobrine recognized Miruko's frustration, understanding that she felt the need to prove herself against the assumptions of weakness due to her appearance. He dismissed the other heroes, suggesting that their motivations were driven by ego and the longing for recognition rather than genuine heroism. He turned to 𝐀𝐮𝐭𝐡𝐨𝐫, criticizing his lack of defense, and continued to call out the flaws in their heroics, leaving them to reflect on their true motivations. Herobrine taunted empty lady, questioning whether she felt neglected by her father, who had yet to return with the milk. He then turned his attention to 𝐒𝐿𝐵, challenging her identity as a hero. He insinuated that if she enjoyed the attention and money thrown her way, she should consider a different profession. The heroes present, including Woods and Miruko, were taken aback by his words. Woods asserted their status as heroes, to which Herobrine responded with skepticism about their achievements. He claimed that merely fighting villains was not enough. True heroes were those who saved people and provided support in times of need, not just those who engaged in flashy displays of power. Ingenium found humor in Herobrine's remarks, recalling a similar experience from his early days. Herobrine then introduced himself with an impressive list of titles, prompting the heroes to look to Nizu and the others for confirmation. Tsukachi acknowledged the truth of Herobrine's claims, leaving the heroes in disbelief. Suddenly, Miruko delivered a powerful kick to Herobrine, expressing her frustration at being attacked repeatedly. Herobrine, nursing a sore foot, remarked on the lack of decorum shown towards foreign leaders. As he and his companions retreated, Miruko was left in pain, her foot injured from the encounter. Bob approached 𝐴𝐮𝐻𝐼 and Tsukachi, delivering a message from Herobrine requesting a meeting with the Todoroki and Bakugou families, excluding the twins and Bakugou's more unruly child. 𝐴𝐮𝐻𝐼 agreed and made his way to greet Mitsuki and Masaru, who were with their baby, Hanako. He informed them of the incident involving their son and Herobrine, leading to Bakugou's outburst about feeling wronged. Mitsuki reprimanded him for his outburst, and Masaru explained that tensions had been rising since Katsumi was placed in an institution. 𝐴𝐮𝐻𝐼 asked the couple to join him in Nizu's office, allowing them to bring Hanako but leaving Bakugou behind. Meanwhile, Tsukachi greeted Endeavor and Tuya, informing them of Herobrine's longing to speak with them about their children's behavior at the USJ. Endeavor sighed, contemplating the situation with his children, who were engaged in conversation with Izumi. The narrative then shifted to a description of the collectivist kingdom, Herobrine's empire's capital, and its vast population. It detailed the various tribes and regions within the empire, including the Pillager tribe Union, Mycelia, End City, Bastion Kingdom, Nameless City, Slime Temple, Arania, and Arcopolis, each with its unique characteristics and inhabitants. Other citizens of the empire have moved in, though they keep to themselves. The military equipment is impressive and varied, designed for both protection and combat efficiency. The collectivist standard helmet is a hybrid of a Stahl helm and an M1 helmet, crafted from 10-gauge steel plates welded together in the center for better deflection. It features a visor and a deflector similar to that on the Adrian helmet, with a shorter, flatter rim. Typically enchanted with Protection 4, Mending I, Thorns 3, and Unbreaking 3, other enchantments are available for private purchase. The collectivist standard fatigue hat is made of leather with a straw-reinforced rim, usually enchanted with Unbreaking 3, Protection 3, and Mending I. While typically dyed brown, different colors can be requested. The collectivist standard fatigue shirt is a long-sleeved wool garment, typically dyed in green, gray, or black, and enchanted with Unbreaking 3, Protection 3, and Mending I. The collectivist standard ballistic chestplate is crafted from treated leather with ceramic plates and spider silk on the inside, capable of stopping most anti-material cartridges. Is typically enchanted with Protection 4, Mending I, Thorns 3, and Unbreaking 3. The collectivist standard universal trousers are made from interwoven wool and silk, suitable for various uses including fieldwork and loungewear. They are typically enchanted with Protection 4, Mending I, and Unbreaking 3. The collectivist standard combat boots are made of hardened leather with netherite toes, typically enchanted with Protection 4, Mending I, Featherfall 4, and Unbreaking 3. The collectivist standard sword bayonet is an 18-inch cutlass knife made from a netherite iron alloy, with netherite and diamond swords available for private purchase. It is enchanted with Sharpness 3, Knockback 2, Mending I, Sweeping Edge 3, and Unbreaking 3. The collectivist standard utility axe is a 24-inch Hudson Bay axe made from a netherite iron alloy, also available in netherite and diamond versions for private purchase. It is enchanted with Efficiency V, Mending I, Sharpness 2, and Unbreaking 3. The collectivist standard entrenching tool is an 18-inch shovel and pick made from a netherite iron alloy, with similar options available for private purchase. It is enchanted with Efficiency V, Mending I, and Unbreaking 3. The collectivist standard combat spear is a 6-foot dark oak pole with a netherite iron alloy head, enchanted with Loyalty 3, Sharpness V, Mending I, and Unbreaking 3. It can be used for both hand-to-hand combat and thrown. The collectivist standard bolt-action rifle Model V resembles an 1886 Lebel rifle. It features a hybrid bolt system combining the Mosin and Leonfield systems for greater durability and rate of fire. It has a removable magazine with a standard capacity of 8 rounds, although 16 and 24-round magazines are available for private purchase. With 600-yard sights, it has an effective firing range of 550 meters and a rate of fire of around 45 to 60 rounds per minute. All enchantments for firearms are available for private purchase. The collectivist standard revolving shotgun Model 2 is a double-action, gas-sealed shotgun that can hold up to 6 shots. Previous pump-action experiments were unsuccessful due to the size of the shells needed to pierce player armor. It has a rate of fire of 30 rounds per minute and an effective range of 50 meters. The collectivist standard semi-automatic pistol Model 2 is based on the Mauser M712 𝐀𝐮𝐭𝐡𝐨𝐫. Incorporating aspects of the 𝗀𝐮𝐭𝐡𝐨𝐫 type, it has a range of 75 meters and a rate of fire of 180 rounds per minute in semi-automatic mode or 950 rounds per minute in full automatic mode. The collectivist standard automatic carbine Model 6 is an open-bolt, select-fire submachine gun that resembles a Lanchester, featuring the receiver of an MP40 and the cooling sleeve of a PPSH. It has a range of 150 meters and a rate of fire of 750 rounds per minute. The collectivist standard squad automatic weapon Model 2 is a gas-operated, rotating open-bolt auto rifle that resembles a bar but is more similar to the M1 Garand. It has a rate of fire of 560 rounds per minute in full auto mode or 240 rounds per minute in burst mode, with a range of 850 meters. The collectivist standard anti-material rifle Model 3 is a straight pull roller delayed rifle designed to handle extreme recoil. It has an effective range of 1,500 meters and a rate of fire of 12 rounds per minute. The collectivist standard light machine gun Model 4 is a gas-operated, rotating bolt machine gun that closely resembles the DP27/28, though it has an external appearance similar to the Lewis gun. It has a rate of fire of 550 rounds per minute and an effective range of 800 meters, firing an intermediate cartridge. The collectivist standard medium/general machine gun Model 2 is an open rotating bolt, recoil-operated, roller-locked machine gun, essentially a Browning M1919 with the mechanics of an MG3. It has an effective range of 1160 meters and a rate of fire of 975 rounds per minute. The collectivist standard heavy machine gun Model 1 and 2 are 6 or 10-barreled machine guns powered by a rotary crank. The 5-barrel version fires from a single barrel with one reciprocating bolt, while the 10-barrel version has a pair of reciprocating bolts capable of firing the 3 o'clock and 9 o'clock barrels alternately. Model I has a rate of fire of up to 3,000 rounds per minute, while Model 2 has a rate of fire twice that, both with an effective firing range of 750 meters. The collectivist standard mace grenade contains a 3,500 grain charge of gunpowder encased in a thick shell, exploding with enough force to send shrapnel flying in all directions. While it can also be used in melee, this is not recommended. The collectivist standard rocket launcher 3 is a single-shot, breech-loading rocket launcher with an effective range of about 40 kilometers and a rate of fire of 3 rounds per minute. One block of TNT weighs 1,650 kilograms and detonates with significant force. Each block contains 4 bundles, or 16 sticks. The collectivist standard automatic cannon is a recoil-operated, closed-bolt 20mm cannon with an effective range of 2,700 meters and a rate of fire of 112 rounds per minute. The collectivist standard light artillery is a single-shot, breech-loading 20mm cannon with an effective range of 3,200 meters and a rate of fire of 15 rounds per minute. The collectivist standard heavy artillery is a single-shot, breech-loading 55mm cannon with an effective range of 3,750 meters and a rate of fire of 10 rounds per minute. The collectivist standard field mortar is a single-shot, muzzle-loading 55mm cannon with an effective range of 145 meters and a rate of fire of 30 rounds per minute. The collectivist standard mortar is a single-shot, breech-loading 75mm mortar with an effective range of 1,640 meters and a rate of fire of 1 round per minute. The conference room fell silent as the Todoroki family and the Bakugou parents processed what they had just heard. Herobrine stood confidently, despite Mitsuki's glare directed at him. Endeavor, filled with anger, stood up abruptly, causing the table to shake. He confronted Herobrine, questioning his integrity for claiming to be a deceased loved one, accusing him of mocking not just the memory of the past but also their family. Tsukachi, the detective, quickly defended Herobrine, asserting that he was speaking the truth. Tuya, visibly agitated, slammed his fists on the table, expressing his distrust. Herobrine then shared a memory that only the Todorokis or close family friends would recognize. He recalled a time when Endeavor had sought his advice as a child, asking him why he wanted to be a hero. Endeavor had expressed his longing to be a hero not only to the world but first to those closest to him. Herobrine's words resonated deeply, and tears welled in Endeavor's eyes as he rushed around the table to embrace him. Charlotte and Bub stood protectively, but Herobrine reciprocated the hug, creating a moment of shared emotion. Mitsuki, along with Rei, Tuya, and Masaru, quickly joined them, checking on the two. Herobrine settled into the embrace, and Mitsuki began to cry, overwhelmed with emotion. She held Hanako tightly, questioning if it was truly him. Rei confirmed it softly, and the family came together in a heartfelt hug. In the midst of this, Hanako reached out for her father, her small arms stretching as far as they could. Herobrine gently took her in his hands, and she cheered joyfully, wrapping her arms around his neck. He marveled at the connection, kissing her forehead tenderly. Masaru captured the moment with his phone, prompting Herobrine to lift Hanako for a picture, whispering sweet words to her as she smiled brightly. Meanwhile, Bub stepped out of the room briefly, allowing Herobrine some private time with his family. In the waiting room, Jeff inquired about the situation, and Bub revealed that Herobrine had a child. The group reacted with surprise and confusion, questioning how this was possible. Bub explained the circumstances, and Reaper suggested a drastic course of action, but Bub insisted they couldn't act without drawing attention to Herobrine's former family. Suddenly, Bub's phone pinged with a message from 𝐀𝐮𝐭𝐡𝐨𝐫, announcing they had discovered what lay beyond the far lands. Bub's excitement was palpable as he jumped up, sharing the news with the group, who celebrated the achievement. Aizawa approached, annoyed by the commotion, while Jeff enthusiastically hugged both teachers, sharing in the joy. Herobrine, still with Hanako, announced he had brought gifts. Charlotte placed a bundle on the table, and Herobrine began to unveil the items, handing Tuya a potion that would protect him from extreme heat. He explained its purpose, and Tuya examined it curiously. For Endeavor, he presented a vase containing a magical flame, and for Rei, he summoned a snow golem, which delighted her as she named it Yuki. Nizu, intrigued, questioned the magic behind it, while Herobrine also gifted him an encyclopedia of his kingdom, sparking interest in their history and culture. Nizu smiled before opening the book and flipping through the pages. Herobrine summoned a small green bird with red shoulders and placed it onto Night-Eye's outstretched finger. He introduced the bird as Speedball, who exclaimed in a comical voice that he had been turned into a parrot. Night-Eye burst into laughter, and Herobrine smiled as he pulled out Speedball's cage and handed it to Sir Night-Eye. He then retrieved a bright blue gemstone attached to a string of smaller diamonds encased in a gold chain and handed the necklace to Mitsuki, who accepted it with wonder in her eyes. She playfully asked if there were no earrings. Izuku shrugged and reached into the bag to pull out Masaru's gift, a compilation of the Overworld's greatest songs by its best composers, which he presented to Masaru, who bowed in gratitude. Herobrine mentioned that if he had known Hanako existed, he would have brought her a dragon egg or something similar, but Mitsuki interrupted, reminding him that meeting her father was the best gift. Herobrine nodded, hugging his daughter closer. He noted that he had gifts for Uncle Aizawa, Hisashi, and the rest of his family, but they had not yet arrived. Just then, Bub peeked into the room, announcing that they had made it across. Meanwhile, Colonel 𝐀𝐮𝐭𝐡𝐨𝐫, the leader of the Imperial Corps of Expedition, was determined to discover what lay beyond the far lands. Despite warnings that no one had ever returned, he was resolute. His father and grandfather had both perished on their own expeditions, but he had succeeded. He requested his right-hand man, 𝐒𝐮𝐬𝐴, to hand him the spyglass, eager to unveil the mysteries beyond their world. Herobrine made his way through Sir Night-Eye's agency, where a meeting with the young king had been scheduled. It had been 2 weeks since his return to Earth, and Herobrine had made headlines worldwide. Ambassadors from various countries were set to meet later that day, but for now, he was with his uncle. After knocking on the door, he checked his applicator, noting the whereabouts of his companions before entering the office. Mirai welcomed him inside, and Night-Eye sighed as he took a seat at his desk. He admitted that he should have shared important information during their last meeting but had hesitated. After taking a deep breath, he opened a desk drawer and pulled out a file, handing it to Herobrine. As he skimmed through the contents, Herobrine's expression darkened with anger upon realizing the insanity of the Overhaul man. 𝐻𝐿 proposed an unorthodox alliance in their crusade against the Shy Hisaki, to which Herobrine responded with a cruel smirk, revealing that he already had a plan. Meanwhile, at the sports festival, Class 1A's student representative, Izumi Yagi, took the stage amid millions of watching eyes. Nervously, she dropped her note cards and bent down to retrieve them, prompting murmurs from the audience. After collecting herself, she shared a heartfelt story about her twin brother, Izuku, who had tragically taken his own life. The audience fell silent, moved by her words. She dedicated her victory to him, expressing her determination to be number one for his sake and encouraging others to strive for greatness as well. In the front row, the Todoroki family and the Bakugou parents scowled, with Hanako pouting at what she perceived as a misguided display of emotion. At the Hoshinoya Hotel in Tokyo, Charlotte and Blaster watched the sports festival on TV, shocked by Izumi's speech. Charlotte's frustration led her to crush a glass in her hand, prompting Blaster to offer assistance. Back at the 𝐻𝐿 agency, Herobrine placed a bottle of red liquid on 𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗟𝗘's desk, claiming it was a healing potion that could revive 𝐬𝐮𝐿 from his coma. 𝐻𝐿 raised an eyebrow, seeking an explanation. Herobrine elaborated that if the former Yakuza leader learned how far his organization had fallen, it would create turmoil. This could lead to a shift in loyalties and potential conflict, providing them with a reason to act against Overhaul and his followers. 𝐻𝐿 nodded, understanding the strategy behind Herobrine's plan. 𝐻𝐿 listened intently, considering the situation. If they were to lay siege to the enemy's base, he wanted to handle Overhaul himself. Sir nodded, deliberately ignoring the unsettling gleam in Izuku's eyes. Meanwhile, 𝐀𝐮𝐭𝐡𝐨𝐫 wandered through an alleyway, completely lost after taking a wrong turn. As he aimlessly shuffled through the city's shadows, a familiar scent caught his attention, BLD. He instinctively pulled out his weapon and quietly followed the scent deeper into the alley. Tensei struggled against the hero killer, blocking another strike. He had sent his sidekicks ahead, focusing on stopping the villain. 𝐶𝐻𝐿 taunted him, questioning the effectiveness of his strategy as he landed a cut on Tensei's forearm. Tensei grimaced, feeling the sting of the blade. 𝐶𝐻𝐿 smiled wickedly, stepping back and liking the weapon clean. Tensei froze as the hero killer's quirk activated. 𝐶𝐻𝐿 approached him, raising his sword and mocking the legacy of All Might's successors. A gunshot rang out, leaving the scene hanging in suspense. Axel sat by the campfire, writing down his observations from the far lands. It had been a day and a half since their arrival, and they had yet to encounter anyone after a long day of travel. Suddenly, Lupos, the group's engineer, appeared, dragging a struggling creature behind him in a web. 𝐶𝐿 inquired about the creature, and Lupos opened the net to reveal an unfamiliar animal. It had serrated mandibles, bright orange eyes, and scales that shimmered like gold and bronze, thrashing as it snapped its jaw. One soldier pointed his weapon at the beast, prompting Axel to shout for everyone to move back. He and Dr. Levi Hades, the group's zoologist, studied the creature carefully, unaware they were being observed. Dr. Hades took measurements while Axel held the creature down, reminding him to be cautious. Axel identified it as an arthropod, and Levi took notes. A shrill whistle interrupted their work as a camp guard rushed toward Axel, reporting that a group of horsemen was approaching from the east. Axel considered the situation before instructing a soldier to signal the horsemen, assuring them of their peaceful intentions while remaining prepared for conflict if necessary. Private Adon Ripper ran toward the horsemen, his torch lighting the way. As he approached, he heard the sounds of horses and shouts. He saw some of the horsemen wave back and called out to them. The lead horseman, stumbling through the darkness, greeted him. Katsumi sat cross-legged, observed closely by doctors through bulletproof glass. It had been 3 months since her admission to the ward, a decision made by her parents due to her troubling behavior and the threat she posed to herself and others. The lead doctor addressed her, seeking her perspective directly. Suddenly, Katsumi charged, but electricity surged through her, a result of the collar designed to contain violent patients. She smirked, recalling past events. In a flashback, Katsumi had sneaked into Izuku's room during a sleepover. The atmosphere was cold and grim, the walls stained and decaying. She approached Izuku, feeling possessive and determined to remind him of their bond. As she mounted his lap, he stirred, confused. Katsumi attempted to assert her control, but Izuku fought back, managing to break free. In the struggle, she grabbed a mug and struck him, declaring her twisted affection for him as he lost consciousness. Back in the present, the doctors were visibly disturbed by her recounting. Katsumi laughed, convinced that Izuku would come to rescue her, her smile reflecting her unstable state. Meanwhile, the horsemen regarded the lone soldier as their leader dismounted and extended his hand. Adon introduced himself as a member of His Majesty's expeditionary forces, while the leader introduced himself as 𝐀𝐮𝐬𝐴, a traveling merchant in need of assistance. He explained that their convoy had recently been robbed by the 𝐒𝐮𝐬𝐴 cult, seeking help from the expeditionary forces. They worship a rogue necromancer named 𝗧𝗟𝗟, whose only goal is total destruction. 𝐻𝐻𝐿 explained as he walked forward, with Adon and his guards following closely behind. Adon paled as he realized the meaning of destruction. They needed assistance from Mr. Dahad, as their group's mission was to make contact with any people beyond their world's borders. If they helped him, he would help them in return. They were completely new to this place. 𝐻𝐻𝐿 welcomed them to Terraria, acknowledging their unfamiliarity. Meanwhile, Herobrine sat in the armored car transporting him to the UN summit, with Charlotte bouncing beside him as he reviewed the meeting topics, primarily focusing on himself and the League of Villains. He took a sip from his drink, careful not to spill it on his new suit. Reaper, his skeletal companion, was instructed to try calling Bub again. The limousine slowed to a stop in front of the United Nations University of Japan. Herobrine confirmed it was indeed where the diplomats convened, and Charlotte looked on in awe. The driver exited the car and opened the door for the royal couple and their guards. Journalists rushed toward them from behind temporary barriers, cameras flashing and microphones shaking as they attempted to get Herobrine to speak. One particularly determined reporter jumped over the fence and approached the king, introducing herself before she was abruptly halted by a large black hand. Jeff, a formidable figure, warned her to step away from the king. The reporter stared in shock as Jeff lifted her and tossed her back over the fence, crushing her microphone underfoot. Her cameraman rushed to her aid, helping her up as she playfully punched him in the arm for her misstep. Meanwhile, Herobrine made his way to the conference hall, where a desk awaited him and Charlotte. The room resembled a stadium, filled with diplomats from all corners of the globe who stared at them in anticipation. As the king and queen took their seats, the sound of a gavel echoed through the hall as Nobuyoki Yamashina, the presiding official, called for order. On behalf of the United Nations, he extended a formal hand of friendship and cooperation to the people of the Overworld. However, he noted that certain issues needed to be addressed. He requested that Mr. Herobrine and Ms. Charlotte introduce themselves by stating their full names, titles, and countries of origin. Herobrine stood and declared his identity as the Emperor and High King of the collectivist kingdom of the Overworld, then took his seat. Charlotte followed suit, introducing herself as Princess Charlotte va Cloris Sphagnumus IV, the current monarch of Mycelia, where she was born, before performing a courteous curtsy. Nobuyoki nodded and turned to the woman beside him, officially commencing the meeting. Meanwhile, 𝐶𝐻𝐿 paused as he felt cold steel press against the back of his head. A voice warned him that it was a warning shot and instructed him to surrender. 𝗀𝐮𝐿, unable to see his savior, felt a sense of familiarity in the voice. The man commanded 𝐶𝐻𝐿 to drop his sword and raise his hands. 𝐶𝐻𝐿 smiled, slowly complying as he let his sword fall to the ground. Bub's phone rang, interrupting the tense standoff. He pressed the muzzle of his shotgun against 𝐶𝐻𝐿's forehead while reaching into his pocket to answer the call. As seconds passed, 𝐶𝐻𝐿's quirk began to fade, allowing 𝐸𝐸nium to regain his footing. Bub informed the caller that he was in an alleyway, just as 𝐶𝐻𝐿 prepared to strike. In a swift motion, 𝐶𝐻𝐿 stabbed Bub in the hand with a concealed dagger. Bub dropped his weapon, but 𝐸𝐸nium quickly grabbed 𝐶𝐻𝐿 and executed a suplex. 𝐀𝐮𝐭𝐡𝐨𝐫 managed to regain his balance and retaliated with a kick to Bub's ribcage. He leaped over 𝗀𝐮𝐭𝐡𝐨, retrieved his sword, and slashed at Bub, who summoned his own sword to block the attack. The two clashed, their swords meeting with a resounding impact. Bub held his ground, attempting to retrieve his gun, but 𝐀𝐮𝐭𝐡𝐨 kicked it away. Bub intercepted 𝐀𝐮𝐭𝐡𝐨's blade and countered with a headbutt, momentarily stunning the vigilante. 𝐀𝐮𝐭𝐡𝐨, frustrated, swung his sword in a desperate attempt to shake off the relentless undead soldier. As they exchanged blows, 𝐀𝐮𝐴 boasted about his mastery of the sword, claiming to have trained tirelessly. Bub, unimpressed, countered that 𝐀𝐮𝐴 should take better care of his weapon. The conversation continued as 𝐀𝐮𝐴 pushed Bub back, his anger boiling over. With a fierce leap, 𝐀𝐮𝐴 charged forward, narrowly missing Bub as he ducked. 𝐀𝐮𝐴 managed to clip Bub's ear just as 𝐒𝐮𝐭𝐡𝐨𝐵 aimed his revolver at him. 𝐀𝐮𝐴 laughed maniacally, kicking the gun from 𝐒𝐮𝐭𝐡𝐴B's hands and stabbing him in the arm. 𝗀𝐮𝐴 winced in pain as 𝐀𝐮𝐴 turned to face Bub once more. The two continued to clash, with 𝐀𝐮𝐴 blocking Bub's moves and delivering powerful kicks. Bub fought back valiantly, but 𝐀𝐮𝐴's relentless assault kept him on the defensive. Despite the odds, Bub remained determined, ready to face whatever came next. 𝐀𝐮𝐴 looked at the severed ear of the zombie, a twisted smile forming on his face as he lifted it to his mouth. He grabbed it with his tongue, but soon felt his stomach churn, rejecting the rotten flesh. He doubled over, unable to keep it down, and the remnants of BLD he had consumed recently spilled out. A cold sensation washed over him as he realized the taste in his mouth was not just the rotting ear or the BLD of others. It was his. Bub stood up and walked over to 𝐒𝐮𝐭𝐡𝐴Be, offering his hand to help him up. The hero accepted the gesture, and they shared a moment of camaraderie. Bub expressed his need for a drink, and 𝐒𝐮𝐭𝐡𝐴Be agreed, noting that he would be the one to pay since Bub's money was not accepted in this place. The elder Ida brother then placed ℎ&DCFFS on 𝐀𝐮𝐴Be, the infamous hero killer. Meanwhile, Herobrine sat at a meeting with the United Nations members, listening to Chairman Yamashina. The chairman gestured for Herobrine to speak, asking why he had come to their world. Herobrine explained that the Overworld faced a significant issue with a group known as the Players, who treated life as a game, committing heinous acts reminiscent of Earth's darkest times. A Mexican diplomat, Ian Hurtado, inquired about the specific atrocities committed by these players. Herobrine presented evidence, handing over a device to Yamashina. The room fell silent as the chairman and others watched disturbing footage of crimes against the vulnerable. Chairwoman Olivia Cook of Australia gasped, unable to comprehend the brutality displayed. The video became increasingly unbearable, prompting Nobuyuki to intervene, expressing disbelief at the horrors they had witnessed. With the young king's presentation, the UN officials began to whisper among themselves, contemplating their next steps. Yamashina asked if Herobrine sought assistance in his war. Herobrine clarified that they were looking for trade agreements instead. The chairman felt relieved and suggested sending ambassadors to assess the potential for interdimensional trade. Herobrine agreed, turning to Charlotte, who had dozed off. He gently woke her, and they prepared to leave the meeting. As they exited, various diplomats introduced themselves. A short woman with straight black hair approached, identifying herself as Senator Tifa Lockhart from Italy. Herobrine greeted her warmly before moving on to Greg Short, who welcomed him on behalf of the United States. Charlotte engaged in conversation with the officials until their limo arrived. Herobrine observed her enjoying herself, feeling a sense of contentment. Once inside the car, Charlotte apologized for taking her time, explaining she had been talking to Senator Lockhart. Herobrine smiled as she settled in beside him, both feeling the fatigue of the long day. Soon, Charlotte fell asleep, and he too began to drift off, enveloped in darkness. Meanwhile, Katsuki Bakugou was skirted through the Hero Commission building, having been invited by President Harakichi Kajiwara. Upon entering her office, he took a seat, questioning the purpose of the meeting. The president revealed a video from the USJ, showcasing his intense confrontation with villains. Bakugou watched himself in action, his aggressive tactics on full display. He felt a surge of anger as he processed the footage, demanding to know if he was being detained. The president assured him that was not the case. Instead, they were there to propose a deal. She acknowledged his potential and the effectiveness of his methods, but reminded him that standard heroes must adhere to strict guidelines. Bakugou's interest peaked as the president hinted at an enticing offer that aligned with his approach. He leaned in, eager to hear more about the opportunity that awaited him. Irredeemable villains, corrupt heroes, individuals who threaten their way of life filled the air as she reached into her desk and pulled out a folder. She asked Mr. Bakugou if he would be willing to kill for the position of number 1. Darkness enveloped the young king as he surveyed his surroundings. The blackness stretched endlessly until he noticed his own hands, scarred and trembling, belonging to Izuku Yagi. He frowned and looked around as the shadows receded, revealing 6 men seated on thrones, solemnly watching him. He wondered if he could assist them in any way. 𝗓𝗓𝗡, with tears streaming down her cheeks, pleaded for his help. Meanwhile, a lone figure walked through the halls of 𝐀𝐮𝐭𝐡𝐨𝐫 General Hospital, unnoticed by the staff. He searched for a specific room, counting the numbers until he found it. Entering the dimly lit room, he approached a bed where an elderly man lay, connected to various machines. He took out a syringe filled with a glowing red liquid and carefully injected it into the saline bag linked to the comatose patient. The monitor began to beep faster, and the once still man clenched his fingers. Yasuda Mito awoke, disoriented, and scanned the room. He questioned his surroundings, taking in the stark white walls and the cold air. As he noticed a tall figure in the corner, he demanded to know who it was. The figure stepped forward, revealing 𝐬𝗓𝗍, who informed him that they had much to discuss. Meanwhile, Herobrine focused intently on the 7 holders of One for All. He asserted that they needed to listen to him. 𝗓𝗓𝗡, with tears in her eyes, begged for help for Izumi. Herobrine's temper flared as he questioned the sincerity of their request. He expressed his frustration over the constant focus on Izumi, demanding to know the true reason behind their plea. A white-haired man explained that One for All was harming Izumi. Herobrine dismissed their concerns, stating that Izumi had chosen to accept the quirk and must face the consequences. Nana continued to plead for help, revealing that Izumi's parents and doctors were baffled by her condition. Herobrine, still resistant, insisted that he had no sister and demanded to know why One for All was endangering her. The white-haired man explained that One for All was a stockpiling quirk, and its combined energy in a child with an already powerful quirk was dangerous. Herobrine contemplated this, realizing that if he eliminated All for One, One for All would lose its purpose. He decided to pursue this course of action, believing that his lack of a quirk gave him an advantage against All for One. He expressed his determination to show All Might the consequences of his failures. Nana, filled with sorrow, questioned his feelings toward them. Herobrine reassured her that while he despised certain individuals, he would still help those he considered his true family. He warned her that his return to this realm meant that All for One would soon face greater threats. Meanwhile, Mito listened intently to 𝗓𝗓𝗍, who explained the urgency of dealing with Overhaul, now a full-blown villain. Mito's concern for his granddaughter, Eri, grew as he demanded to know her whereabouts. 𝗓𝗓𝗍 revealed that one of Chisaki's men was seen with a girl matching Eri's description, and Mito's revival was part of her rescue plan. Mito's anger flared as he questioned what Overhaul had done to Eri. 𝗓𝗓𝗍 explained that Overhaul was obsessed with erasing quirks and restoring the Yakuza to power, using Eri's quirk to achieve his goals. Realizing the gravity of the situation, 𝗓𝗓𝗍 decided to make a phone call for assistance. Mito, hoping for a response, reached out to a contact known as the Dragon, cashing in a favor. He awaited a reply, anxious for help in the dire circumstances surrounding his granddaughter. Kazuma Kiryu usually came through. Meanwhile, Izumi was lost in a dream. Shoto and Katsuki were fanning her while her brother fed her katsudon. She reclined in her beach chair, basking in the morning sun. Suddenly, a shadow loomed over her, blocking the sunlight. She opened her eyes and adjusted her sunglasses, recognizing the figure. Izumi was surprised to see her grandmother. They needed to talk. In 𝗓𝗓𝗍's conference room, Herobrine sat with his men, strategizing for the impending conflict. Bub laid a map of the building flat on the table, indicating their target. Herobrine turned to Mirai, inquiring about Eri's location. Mirai recalled that Mito had mentioned a basement beneath the building, used for storage. According to Mito's information, Eri was being held there by Chisaki. Herobrine nodded, then asked when they should expect Mirio and Mr. Mito. Night Eye assured him they would arrive shortly, having been instructed to wait to avoid any premature action. A knock at the door signaled their arrival, and Night Eye opened it to greet Mirio and Bubble Girl, who entered the room. Mirio took a seat across from Night Eye, acknowledging him with a nod. He introduced his companions, pointing to Bubble Girl and then to 𝐶𝐿, who greeted the group. Herobrine inquired about the arrival of other guests, and Mirio informed him they would be there in about 10 minutes, as they had some matters to attend to. Just then, another knock at the door caught everyone's attention. Bub opened the door, surprised to see an unexpected visitor. Meanwhile, Yasuda Mito sat across from Kazuma Kiryu, expressing the urgency of his situation. He explained that it had been years since they last spoke, but he needed to call in a favor. Kazuma leaned back, curious about the importance of Mito's request. Mito revealed that Kai had taken his granddaughter, Eri, and was using her to create a quirk-erasing drag. Kazuma's expression darkened as he grasped the implications of such a threat. Mito described Eri's quirk, rewind, and how dangerous it was for Kai to exploit it. Kazuma's concern grew as he realized the severity of the situation. Mito had attempted to reason with Kai, but it was clear he had lost his sanity. Kazuma concluded that they needed to eliminate the threat, knowing how powerful Kai's quirk was. He pulled out his phone, determined to ensure Overhaul would pay for his actions against Eri. Meanwhile, Izumi stood at the doorway of Sir Nightai's conference room, confronting the guard blocking her way. She demanded to see her brother, expressing her frustration. The guard hesitated, questioning her identity. Izumi, fueled by urgency, used her quirk to push past him and rushed into the room. Sir Night Eye was taken aback as Izumi stormed in, launching herself toward her brother, Izuku. However, she was abruptly halted and sent crashing to the floor, creating a small impact. Jeff, one of the guards, shouted a warning, asserting the need to protect the king. Herobrine's guards instinctively drew their weapons, aiming at Izumi, who pleaded with her brother, expressing her disbelief at his situation. For the first time in 3 years, Herobrine felt a pang of fear, worried about being discovered by his former family. He knew this moment would come eventually, but he hoped to delay it. Night Eye introduced Izumi to Herobrine, explaining her connection to All Might and suggesting she was projecting her feelings onto him. Izumi insisted that her brother needed to return home, but Night Eye firmly instructed her to leave, emphasizing the importance of their investigation. Herobrine, feeling the weight of the situation, offered a brief embrace to Izumi, who held on longer than he anticipated. After a moment, she released him and exited the room, unaware that she held something in her hand that could either confirm or challenge the belief that her brother was still alive. An uncomfortable silence settled in the room as the Yakuza leaders and heroes exchanged glances. Mirio broke the tension, questioning the presence of Mito and Kiryu. Night Eye explained that he had invited Mito, who had brought a guest. Herobrine raised his fist, calling for silence. He redirected the conversation to Mito, asking if he had requested Overhaul to cease operations. Mito confirmed that he had, but Overhaul had refused. He mentioned that only one of his subordinates, 𝐀𝐮𝐬𝐴, had sided with him, while the others remained fiercely loyal to Overhaul. Herobrine listened intently, taking notes on how to dismantle Overhaul's organization. After gathering enough information, Herobrine issued orders. He instructed Jeff and Mirio to retrieve the girl and ensure her safety, while also planning to confront 𝐀𝐮𝐭𝐡𝐨𝐫. He directed Bub and Kiryu to engage Mimic, aiming to capture him for leverage. Lastly, he assigned Goliath to deal with Nemoto, knowing his quirk wouldn't affect him, and instructed Reaper to confront Rikiya with a splash potion of weakness, confident that his spectral vitality would protect him. Reaper raised his gun excitedly while Bubble Girl wore a look of discontent. He instructed SQR to take some of Kiryu's men and retrieve 𝐶𝐿, noting that SQR couldn't be harmed due to his lack of hands. The slime made a sound of agreement, akin to blowing a raspberry underwater. The arthropod hero, 𝐶𝐿, was directed to handle Hojo, receiving an enchanted diamond pickaxe from Herobrine. Blaster was assigned to deal with 𝗀𝐫 and was told to bring Java along for a walk. Herobrine, SerratedSamurai, and Dreadwing would confront 𝐀𝐮𝐭𝐡𝐨𝐫, and if necessary, Kendo. The group nodded in understanding as Herobrine outlined the rest of his plan, declaring that tonight Overhaul would face justice. At the 𝐀𝐮𝐭𝐡𝐨𝐫 compound, Herobrine, SerratedSamurai, 𝐀𝐮𝐭𝐡𝐨𝐫, and the rest of the team gathered, focused on the base. Behind them, a diverse team of heroes, monsters, and Yakuza henchmen prepared to take down the offenders, alive or dead. Herobrine raised his hand, signaling Mirio and Jeff to wait. As the clock struck 9, he closed his fist, and Jeff teleported himself and Mirio into the compound. Mirio dashed down the stairwell with Jeff closely following, his 𝐀𝐮𝐭𝐡𝐨𝐫 ready. As they navigated the hall, Mirio checked each door while Jeff kept watch for any of the precepts. When Mirio phased his head through a door, he was surprised to find a little girl sleeping peacefully. He tried to get her attention, but Jeff yanked the door open and stepped inside. Mirio whispered for Jeff to wait as he picked up the girl. Eri cuddled up to him as they exited the room, and Mirio smiled, noting that she seemed to like Jeff. However, they soon found themselves face to face with 𝐀𝐮𝐿 at the end of the hallway. 𝐀𝐮𝐿 glared at the duo, but before he could act, Jeff vanished, taking Eri and Mirio with him. Frustrated, 𝐀𝐮𝐿 shouted as they reappeared at the base of operations. Mirio instructed Jeff to take good care of Eri as he handed her over to her grandfather before teleporting back to confront 𝐀𝐮𝐿. Mirio greeted the villain, but Jeff quickly struck him with his club, sending him crashing down the hallway and through a wall. Mirio winced at the impact as 𝐀𝐮𝐿 emerged from the rubble, vowing to enjoy defeating them both. He launched his hair at the two, but Jeff pushed Mirio out of the way and ducked, using his 𝐻𝐻𝐿 to ensnare the villain's hair. 𝐀𝐮𝐿 screamed as he felt the grip tighten. With a swift motion, Jeff yanked hard, pulling 𝐀𝐮𝐿's hair and rendering him powerless as Mirio slapped 𝐀𝐮𝐿 onto him. The villain, breathing heavily, threatened them, but Mirio calmly pointed out that he was in no position to make threats. Jeff then teleported them back to the rooftops across the street, where a member of the 𝐀𝐮𝐭𝐡𝐨𝐫 clan remarked on their speed. Mirio noted that 𝐀𝐮𝐿 had been surprisingly weak, dropping the villain to the ground. Jeff sent a message to his king, confirming that the girl was safe and 𝐀𝐮𝐿 had been captured. Meanwhile, Reaper and Bubble Girl led a small group through the second floor of the building, searching for any of the 8 precepts. Suddenly, a rumbling echoed as they turned a corner and spotted a large, masked man charging down the hallway. Reaper quickly pulled his rifle and fired, hitting the brute in the arms and torso. 𝐀𝐮𝐭𝐡𝐨𝐫 screamed as he felt the impact. He halted and swung his fist at Reaper, who dodged and blasted a hole in the man's hand, causing him to recoil in pain. Bubble Girl, at Reaper's command, launched a potion at Rikia's face, prompting him to wipe it off in annoyance. Reaper, growing bored, asked if Rikia was ready to give up, but the villain defiantly shouted that he would never surrender. As he launched another attack, one of the Yakuza members climbed up his arm and struck the back of his neck, causing him to stumble. The Yakuza member then slammed his bat into Rikia's kneecap, resulting in a painful fall. The man raised his bat again, striking 𝐀𝐮𝐭𝐡𝐨𝐫 on the head. One of the other Yakuza members expressed disappointment, stating that they were told these opponents would put up a good fight. Majima Goro chuckled and asked what they should do next. In another part of the building, Bub managed to knock down the door to Mimic's office and turned on the light. He asked what Mimic looked like, receiving the description of a stuffed animal-like figure. Bub drew his weapons and kicked over Mimic's desk, calling out for him to come out and play. He picked up a bundle of cash, thinking it might attract Mimic's attention, and pulled out a lighter. Suddenly, the wall exploded as a bullet struck Bub in the eye. He noted that Mimic had a gun, and he and the Yakuza leader dodged the barrage of bullets as Joy Iranaka revealed himself from behind the wall. Mimic taunted them, claiming he was already dead as he fired again, hitting his target. Kiryu appeared beside him and shot the revolver from Mimic's hand. The puppet man pleaded for a deal, but Kiryu demanded he come quietly or face dire consequences. Bub added that Mimic should exit his doll body, commenting on his goblin-like appearance. Suddenly, the black body burst open, revealing a large, muscular man who grabbed Kiryu and threw him aside, hitting Bub in the process. Bub quickly grabbed his sword and slashed Joy across the chest, leaving a significant wound. The brute flinched as he stepped back, letting out a cry when Kiryu struck him in the stomach. Izumi sat in Recovery Girl's office, diligently filling out a DNA test. Recovery Girl, focused on her work, informed Izumi that taking the hair of a monarch could lead to serious consequences. It had been 3 hours since Izumi returned from Nitai's office, requesting the school nurse to conduct a DNA test on Herobrine's hair and a sample of her BLD. Suddenly, several individuals, led by an elderly man with prominent eyebrows, rushed in. The man exclaimed in shock upon seeing a young girl being carried in by paramedics. Izumi, concerned, asked what had happened. The elderly man explained that his granddaughter had just been rescued from the 8 precepts of death and needed immediate medical attention. Recovery Girl quickly inquired about the girl's name, and the man replied that her name was Eri Mito, noting her BLD type and that she possessed a dual quirk called Rewind. Chio took notes as the paramedics checked Eri for fever and infection. Izumi, anxious about the DNA test, was pushed aside by Recovery Girl, who insisted that it wasn't the right time. Recovery Girl then turned to Izumi, who was curious about what wisdom the elder hero would share. Instead, Recovery Girl bluntly told her to be quiet. Setsuno glared as he drew his katana, facing a large blob of green slime that oozed toward him, accompanied by men wielding their own weapons. He slashed vertically, severing the slime in 2. A smile crossed his face as the green mass fell, but horror struck him when the 2 halves began to move and reform into smaller blobs. They attacked, managing to grab his arms and causing him to drop his sword. Setsuno shouted for help as the creatures climbed up his arms, feeling the pressure against his skin. One of the Yakuza members struck him, sending him crashing to the floor. The man ordered to get Setsuno out of there as the slime reformed into a single entity. Sakaki stumbled down the hall, a bottle of sake in hand as he prepared for a fight. He dropped the bottle and opened the door to the warehouse, calling out for his boss. In the center of the building, he spotted Nemoto curled up on the floor. Approaching his slumped-over colleague, he tapped him, causing Nemoto to fall over, revealing he had been wrapped in white silk. Sakaki leaned down to pull the webbing off Nemoto's face, noticing his terrified expression. Suddenly, a string of web shot out and ensnared Sakaki, lifting him off the ground. He slammed into the ceiling, leaving a dent in the tin roofing. As he swung down, the web strained under his weight. Slowly turning around, he saw his assailant, a giant black spider. Goliath placed a leg onto the web holding Sakaki up, and despite his pleas, severed the line, dropping him 3 stories onto the hard concrete below. Meanwhile, Centipeder narrowly dodged a strike from Hojo, blocking it with a pickaxe before retaliating with a kick. Hojo caught Centipeder's foot, pulling him down. Centipeder held onto the pickaxe and slammed it into Hojo's thigh, causing the villain to scream. Seizing the moment, Centipeder kicked Hojo in the stomach, forcing him to double over. Hojo removed his mask, only for Centipeder to land a punch on his jaw. Hojo managed to block another punch, but Centipeder struck again, hitting him in the ribs. Hojo fell to the ground, breathing heavily as Centipeder declared him under arrest, delivering a roundhouse kick to his head before subduing him and alerting the others. Tabe stared in horror at the screens as Overhaul sneered, preparing for his last stand. He removed his right glove and touched the wall, revealing a hidden safe. After entering the combination, he opened it to find quirk erasing bullets. Satisfied, he shut the safe and covered it up again, instructing his subordinates to deal with the intruders while he confronted Herobrine. As Overhaul made his way through the building, he soon found himself face to face with Herobrine and Sir Night-Eye in the lab. Overhaul raised an eyebrow, intrigued by how Herobrine had anticipated his location. Herobrine explained that someone like Overhaul, who was a germaphobe, would avoid the elevator due to its uncleanliness and would prefer a space he was familiar with, like the lab, which was regularly cleaned. The final 3 members of the 8 precepts arrived in the lobby, where they encountered Herobrine's men, Sir Night-Eye's associates, and several Kazuma clan henchmen. Bub mocked them, calling them pathetic, which enraged Tabe, who charged forward. However, every gun in the building was suddenly aimed at him and his allies. 𝐀𝐮𝐭𝐡𝐨 announced their arrest, handcuffing 𝐀𝐮𝐭𝐡𝐨𝐫 as Mirio and Bubble Girl assisted. Ting'ai was interrupted when Kendo struck both him and 𝐾𝐮𝐭𝐡𝐨 on the head. Kendo expressed his longing to fight the boss, and Bub shrugged in agreement. Suddenly, Herobrine, 𝐬𝐶, and Overhaul reappeared on the roof of the building, leaving the two older men in shock. Herobrine approached 𝐬𝐶, noting that this was the moment when the villain typically revealed a secret weapon or acted recklessly. He vanished and reappeared behind Overhaul, whispering that it wouldn't happen. Overhaul realized he was falling just after his feet left the ground, suspended thousands of meters in the air with Herobrine. Herobrine asked him about the view, holding him by his foot as Overhaul screamed in panic. Herobrine pointed out that in this position, Overhaul's quirk was essentially useless, with nothing to touch for miles. As the cold wind rushed past, Overhaul felt the chill to his core. Herobrine suggested that perhaps Overhaul should consider surrendering. Despite his precarious situation, 𝐬𝐶 refused, declaring he would never give up. He intended to rid the world of what he deemed a plague and restore the Yakuza's reign. Herobrine proposed that surrendering could end the ordeal, falling beside 𝐬𝐶 as he flailed through the air. Herobrine taunted him about how the news would portray his demise, emphasizing the shame of failing with such a powerful quirk. Overhaul screamed as the ground loomed closer, the tension mounting. 𝐬𝐶 watched as Herobrine brought down a now vulnerable 𝐬𝐶, who curled up on the ground and muttered his surrender. 𝐬𝐼 inquired about Herobrine's actions, to which he replied that he had simply appealed to reason. 𝐼 then placed anti-quirk cuffs on 𝐬𝐶. The following morning, both Herobrine and 𝐬𝐼 turned to Mito, curious about his situation. Mito explained that due to his past connections and status, he might not be able to care for Eri, as the police were investigating him. He acknowledged his status as an old criminal, not the influence Eri needed after her experiences. He asked Herobrine to take care of her, recognizing his potential as a leader and mentor. Herobrine agreed, promising to look after her. Mito added a final note about Eri's fondness for apples before being scurried away. In Recovery Girl's office, Chiyo tended to Eri, who gently sipped from a cup of water. Eri expressed her gratitude, and Chiyo assured her to ask for anything else she needed. As Eri settled into her blanket, Chiyo approached Izumi, who was fixated on the computer screen. Izumi pointed at the screen, causing Recovery Girl to drop her cane in shock when she saw the DNA match was 100%. Herobrine observed Eri sleeping fitfully, her lips quivering. Charlotte whispered about how cute she was, and they both watched as Eri stirred. When she awoke, she looked around in confusion and began to tear up. Herobrine reassured her that she was safe and that the bad man was gone. Eri asked where he had gone, and Herobrine explained that he was in a place from which he could not return. Days had passed since Overhaul's arrest, and he found himself sedated and moved to a dark, damp room, chained to a table. The air was thick with an unpleasant smell as he struggled to move. Suddenly, the door swung open, and a figure entered, introducing themselves with a sinister tone. They revealed a toolbox and brandished a hammer, preparing to inflict pain. In the hospital, Mirio and 𝐬𝐼 entered Eri's room with a gift basket. Mirio approached her, but Eri recoiled in fear. He apologized and placed the basket on the table, filled with fruit, candy, and trinkets. Eri, overwhelmed with emotion, pulled her knees to her chest and cried, feeling undeserving of kindness. Charlotte and Herobrine comforted her, urging her not to think that way. "You are not a cursed child," he said as her crying began to subside. "There's no such thing." She looked up at him, her sad eyes softening his tough exterior. "But my quirk makes people disappear." "Look at me," Herobrine urged. "Then let's teach you how to use it properly." Eri's confusion was evident on her face. "What? UA has plenty of places to train, and so does Lord Herobrine's castle," 𝐬𝐼 explained. "But what if I hurt somebody?" Herobrine smiled reassuringly. "Don't worry. I'll make sure nothing happens," he said, extending his hand. Eri frowned, hesitating before pulling her hand back. "What if the bad man comes back?" "I promise he won't ever bother you or anyone else again," just like all the others in his group. She took his hand. It had been over a year since Izuku's tragic passing, and the impact on the Yagi family was profound. Inko had nearly retired from heroics, and Toshinori's once bright smile had faded. When the Hero Commission approved Aldra, he wasted no time confronting the smug teacher who had failed to protect his son. Unfortunately, the trial fell apart, and the staff and students were left unpunished. All Might reflected on the situation as he sat at the dining room table. "How was your day, dear?" Inko asked as she took a seat across from him. "Fine," he replied solemnly, just as Izumi burst through the door. "Dad," she exclaimed, rushing toward them. "What is it, sweetie?" Toshinori asked, concern evident in his voice. "You have to see this," she said, holding up test results in a manila envelope. "What's in there, Izumi?" Inko asked, her worry growing. Izumi opened the file and handed the contents to her mother. "Oh honey, no," Inko said, examining the information. "This can't be right." All Might studied the paper, realizing the evidence was accurate. He and Inko simultaneously grasped the truth. Herobrine is our son. With Eri, the young girl took the white-eyed man's hand and looked at him. "Hi, I'm Herobrine. I'm going to take care of you from now on. Would you like that?" Eri nodded slowly as Mirio smiled. "How about a picture?" he suggested, and Eri nodded again. "Smile." Both Herobrine and Charlotte smiled, while Eri simply stared at the camera. "I know it sounds silly, but I think I've forgotten how to smile," she admitted. The flash went off, and a heavy silence filled the room. "That's okay. We'll help you smile again," Herobrine said, sitting on the bed and opening his arms. Eri crawled over and hugged him, tears streaming down her cheeks as she slowly dozed off. "You promise," she murmured. "I promise." Herobrine carried Eri as she slept, gently rubbing her back as she snored. Charlotte skipped alongside him as he took out his applicator and called Bub. "Bub, increase the training." "Right away, sir." Time passed, and Overhaul remained in his dark confinement, his body battered and broken. He begged for release from his suffering, his left eye lost to torment. His wounds festered as he languished in agony, wishing for an end. "Let me die," he pleaded, his voice weak. The darkness enveloped him, and he felt the cold drops of water fall from above, each one a reminder of his torment. "Oh God, just let me die," he cried out in despair. Herobrine carried Eri on his shoulders, a pair of sunglasses shielding his eyes. "So, Eri, what do you like to do for fun?" he asked, noticing her frown. "The bad man said that fun was a waste of time," she replied, which saddened him. The bad man was wrong. "What is something you've always wanted to do?" "Get away from the bad man, but we've already done that," she said thoughtfully. "I know. We'll go to the mall." "Since it's a school day, it won't be busy," Charlotte suggested. "That's a great idea," Herobrine agreed. "Eri, would you like to go to the mall?" "What's a mall?" she asked. Eri's eyes lit up at the sights in the mall. "What's that?" she asked excitedly, pointing at a candy store. "It's a candy store. Do you want to get some candy?" Eri nodded and climbed down from his shoulders. As they entered the store, they were greeted by a delightful array of sweet scents and colorful displays. "Wow, it's so colorful," Eri exclaimed, dragging her new parents along. "Can I get one?" she asked, pointing to a variety pack of candy apples. "Yes, you can," Charlotte replied, picking it up and handing it to Eri. "What do we say?" "Thank you," Eri said, trying to open the box. "We have to pay for it first, silly," Charlotte reminded her, and Eri nodded. The trio continued their adventure through the mall, visiting each store Eri wanted to explore. The young girl trotted along, holding Charlotte's hand as Herobrine carried the younger girl's shopping bags. He turned to see Mitsuki and Bakugou approaching, with Hanako nestled comfortably in her grandfather's arms. Herobrine greeted them warmly, and Mitsuki pointed out to Hanako, "Look, it's Papa." The baby looked up at her father and smiled. Eri, hiding shyly behind Charlotte's leg, asked who they were. Herobrine introduced them, saying, "This is Grandpa Masaru and Grandma Mitsuki. And this is Hanako, your baby sister." Eri's eyes brightened as Masaru handed Hanako to Herobrine. "Hanako, this is Eri, your new big sister," he said, encouraging Eri to take a closer look at the baby. Hanako reached out toward Eri, saying her name softly. Eri exclaimed that Hanako had spoken, and Herobrine offered, "Would you like to hold her?" Eri hesitated, worried about hurting the baby. Herobrine reminded her, "Eri, remember what I told you." Eri nodded, recalling the mantra, "When in doubt, pinkies out." With gentle care, Herobrine placed Hanako into Eri's arms. Mitsuki commented on how cute the moment was, while Herobrine reminded Eri to support Hanako's head. As Hanako rested her head on Eri's shoulder, she began to drift off to sleep. Eri smiled widely as Hanako nibbled on her hair, feeling a rush of joy at being a big sister. Her parents and grandparents captured the moment with a photograph, preserving the memory. Eri promised Hanako, "Hi Hanako, I'm Eri. I'm going to be the best big sister in the whole wide world." Masaru joked about feeling overwhelmed by the cuteness as they all watched the siblings bond. Meanwhile, Nizu sat in his office, engaged in a meeting with an agent when his phone buzzed. Checking the message, he was startled to read, "Herobrine is Izuku." He slammed his paw on the desk in frustration, exclaiming that they weren't supposed to know. Aizawa, Mike, and Midnight rushed into the room, bombarding Nizu with questions about the implications of the revelation. Nizu silenced them with a shout, shattering his teacup in the process. He introduced Agent Sherry Muller, who was there to discuss the recent Nomu issues. Elsewhere, Enji, Rei, Tuya, and Fuyumi stared in disbelief at the same text. Natsuo crossed his arms, questioning if it was a joke. Endeavor sighed heavily, deciding to call Toshinori for clarification. As he listened to Toshinori's explanation, he realized the gravity of the situation and reacted with frustration, slamming his fist on the dining room table, causing it to crack. Rei, alarmed by her husband's outburst, asked what had happened. Enji explained that Shoko's conspiracy theories had come back to haunt them. Sir Night-Eye, after reading the text, took a moment to gather his thoughts before sending a warning to Izuku about the potential dangers ahead. He reflected on his vision of the war, filled with chaos and destruction, and knew he had to act. Back with Herobrine, he stared at his phone in shock, hoping that things wouldn't spiral out of control. Unbeknownst to him, a camera was capturing this moment with his family. Meanwhile, President Harakichi Kajiwara reviewed a video presented by Miya Takano. She inquired about how Miya had obtained the information regarding Herobrine and his daughters. Miya explained that she had been following Herobrine for an interview when she noticed him with Charlotte and their children. Kajiwara recognized the significance of the information and instructed her secretary to investigate the two girls further. In return for her contribution, Kajiwara promised Miya an interview with both Herobrine and All Might. In a meeting room at UA, Herobrine, his children, Charlotte, their allies, and various heroes gathered. Herobrine sighed, acknowledging that they had found out about his identity. He explained that Izumi had managed to obtain a DNA sample, which led to the revelation. He expressed his understanding of the situation and shared that it was time for him and Charlotte to return to the Overworld to fulfill their royal duties. The room was filled with mixed emotions as they processed the news, wishing them well but feeling the weight of their departure. Eraserhead was interrupted as the door swung open with a bang. Toshinori announced his presence with enthusiasm. The Yagis and the Todoroki twins entered Nizu's office, hoping for a meeting with the young king. Upon entering, they were greeted by familiar faces, friends, family, and the man himself. Toshinori looked at Herobrine and called him son, while Inko rushed forward, exclaiming her joy. However, she halted midair as Herobrine raised a fist, and she realized the truth. Inko cooed, recognizing Izuku's quirk, but Herobrine sneered in response. He dismissed her excitement, revealing the pain of his past. He declared that he was not Toshinori's son, stating that his real son had tragically died. The tension escalated as Izuku confronted Toshinori, accusing him of avoiding responsibility for his actions. Izumi attempted to intervene, but Herobrine cut her off, expressing his disdain for her words. Inko pleaded with Herobrine to return home, expressing her longing for him. She mentioned Katsumi's willingness to share him, but Herobrine rejected the notion, asserting that he had found a better home without them. The confrontation intensified, with 𝗧𝗓𝗠 urging Herobrine to accept one for all, but Herobrine firmly refused, insisting he did not need it to confront all for one. The atmosphere shifted when Izumi revealed that she no longer possessed one for all, silencing everyone in the room. 𝐀𝐮𝐭𝐡𝐨𝐫 then suggested that Herobrine teleport back to the overworld. Herobrine picked up 𝐴𝐵 and bid farewell to Hanako with a gentle kiss on her forehead. He addressed everyone, stating he would return but felt certain individuals did not deserve to know when. As a portal opened, Inko cried out, desperately trying to reach Herobrine, fearing she would lose him again. Meanwhile, Izumi faced SerratedSamurai, who questioned her about one for all. The tension in the room was palpable as she struggled to respond. In another location, Katsuki spoke with the HPSC president, explaining how he acquired one for all. She expressed her excitement about its potential impact on the commission's plans. Katsuki, skeptical, inquired about her true intentions, to which she revealed her ambition to recreate the Empire of Japan. Back in the overworld, Herobrine carried 𝐴𝐵 through the portal, excitedly asking her if she was ready to see her new home. 𝐴𝐵's enthusiasm was infectious as she marveled at the city before her, likening it to a fairy tale. As they stepped out, 𝐴𝐵 ran ahead, eager to explore. Charlotte commented on the differences between their old home and the new one, while Herobrine acknowledged the less pleasant aspects of 𝐀𝐮𝐭𝐡𝐨𝐵. 𝐴𝐵 led the way, and Herobrine allowed her the freedom to explore, trusting her instincts. Meanwhile, Inko wept on the floor, comforted by 𝗧𝗓𝗠 as others expressed their frustration toward Izumi. The atmosphere was heavy with disappointment as they questioned her decision to give one for all to Katsuki. Izumi defended herself, revealing her struggle with the quirk and her longing to be free from its burden. Katsuki asked and she gave in. The question lingered in the air, prompting curiosity. She knew he would take it. After all, he was the one who had told Izuku to give up on everything. Aizawa sighed as 𝗧𝗓𝗠 stood up, addressing Izumi with a firm tone. Mitsuki gently bounced Hanako as Masaru spoke up, seeking clarity. Izumi looked up, and Shoka announced herself, taking responsibility for the situation. Endeavor sighed, and Rei shook her head, expressing her frustration. She reminded them of the turmoil Katsumi had faced after the incident, recalling how they had to hold her down while the orderlies intervened. Shoka insisted that Katsumi had a right to know, being Hanako's mother. Mitsuki shrugged, acknowledging the unpredictability of Katsumi's current state of mind. They all understood that she was likely in a state of chaos. Meanwhile, 𝐴𝐵 stared in wonder at the front of the building, her eyes wide with amazement. It felt a bit eerie, and she clung to her father's breathed leg for comfort. Herobrine reassured her, explaining that the spooky appearance would deter any bad guys. 𝐴𝐵 declared her intention to be braver than any villain, and Charlotte smiled at her bravery. After some time, Herobrine led 𝐴𝐵 to the garden, where she marveled at the beauty of the flowers. He took a seat on the ground and asked her to remain calm when meeting Dreadwing. 𝐴𝐵 agreed, sitting in front of him. Suddenly, a dark shape circled overhead before landing with a thud, startling her. As the dragon curled on the ground, 𝐴𝐵 asked if she could pet it. Herobrine confirmed that it was a female dragon and encouraged her to approach. 𝐴𝐵 introduced herself, and the dragon responded by nuzzling her gently, causing her to giggle at the ticklish sensation. Herobrine captured the moment on his phone, smiling at the bond forming between his daughter and the dragon. Back with Bakugou, he followed the Hero Commission president as she explained the intricacies of acquiring one for all. She described the quirk's potential and its connection to the spirits of previous holders. Bakugou expressed his ignorance about All Might's injury, prompting the president to recount a legendary battle against the formidable villain known as All for One. They stood before a window where scientists studied a peculiar specimen, and Bakugou sneered at the sight. The president elaborated on their plans to utilize the DNA to create tools for their mission. Bakugou listened intently, raising an eyebrow at the mention of mental conditioning and the introduction of a new ally, Lady Nagant. Later, Herobrine sat at the head of the dining room table, with 𝐴𝐵 and Bruja on one side and Charlotte on the other. 𝐻𝗧𝗏 inquired about Eri's dinner preferences, and Eri contemplated what would pair well with applesauce. 𝗏𝗏 suggested pork steaks, which Eri enthusiastically accepted. Kenichi, the butler, took their orders to the chef, and soon their food arrived. As they enjoyed their meal, Charlotte asked Eri for her thoughts on the dinner, and Eri happily declared it delicious. 𝗏𝗏 playfully pinched Eri's cheek, and they discussed dessert options, settling on apple pie. After dinner, Herobrine carried Eri to her new bedroom, revealing the surprise he had arranged while they dined. Eri's eyes lit up with joy as she explored her new room and toys, expressing her gratitude with a heartfelt hug around his knee. Later that night, Herobrine entered his own bedroom, seeking rest. However, he was met with a surprise as 𝗏𝗏 greeted him, dressed in a way that caught his attention. Just then, Charlotte entered, playfully teasing him. Herobrine found himself captivated by the scene unfolding before him, realizing he was in for an eventful night. Charlotte crawled over to Herobrine and playfully pushed him down into the pillows. She teased him with a smile, suggesting he should prepare for what was to come. Meanwhile, 𝐀𝐮𝐭𝐡𝐨𝐫 was inconsolable. She sat in Izuku's room for 3 days after he returned to his world, neglecting her own needs and overwhelmed by her emotions. She repeatedly apologized to herself, clutching Izuku's all-might onesie to her chest, wishing for his return. 𝗏𝗪 sighed as he listened to his wife's cries. With Izumi at school, he was the only one there to comfort her. He opened the door to Izuku's room, where a wave of tears greeted him. He looked at 𝗀𝐻𝐭, who was holding the onesie tightly, as if it might disappear. He urged her to be patient, reminding her that Izuku would eventually come back, and they would be a family again. 𝗀𝐻𝐭 sobbed, expressing her guilt over Izuku's situation. She believed it was their fault he was quirkless, blaming all for one for stealing his quirk. 𝗏𝗪 tried to reason with her, but she was adamant about her feelings. Their heated exchange revealed deep-rooted fears and frustrations, with 𝗀𝐻𝐭 accusing 𝗏𝗪 of filling Izuku's head with unrealistic expectations of heroism. Meanwhile, Shigaraki smirked as he entered the asylum, contemplating the individuals who had been wronged by society and might assist him in his plans against the heroes. A guard rushed at him, but Shigaraki swiftly incapacitated him before moving on to the main office. He rummaged through the files and found one that piqued his interest, Katsumi Bakugou. He recognized her name and noted her connection to Izuku. Katsumi sat in her cell, desperately trying to stay awake, waiting for Izuku to rescue her. Suddenly, the door burst open, and a man with blue hair and red eyes entered. He introduced himself and offered to help her escape in exchange for a few favors. Katsumi, frustrated with Izuku's delay, considered his proposal. In another part of the story, Colonel Grizzly asked Arthos to describe a figure named 𝗧𝗏. Arthos explained that 𝗧𝗏 was a lunatic who worshipped a powerful entity known as the Moon Lord, possessing advanced magical abilities. He warned Grizzly about the followers, particularly the white-hooded ones who were fewer in number but more dangerous. Bub hummed to himself as he navigated the mansion, enjoying the dimly lit atmosphere. Suddenly, the royal butler Kenichi approached him with an urgent message from the new leader of the layers. Bub instructed him to bring the phone so he could inform the king. As the story unfolded, Herobrine was interrupted during a moment of intimacy with Charlotte and 𝗏𝗏 by a knock at the door. Herobrine called out to find out who it was, only to learn it was Bub with an important message. Despite the interruption, he and his companions were eager to continue their activities. Meanwhile, 𝗏𝐻𝐿 discussed the 𝗏𝗏 with Agent Mueller, revealing that the creature was a former convict named 𝗀𝐻𝐿 𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗟𝗘. He shared details about the genetic tampering the 𝗏𝗏 had undergone before its encounter with Herobrine, providing insight into the complex situation they faced. Now, the specimen itself was not a biohazard, but from what they could tell, it had been biologically altered to contain multiple quirks. The very idea of multiple quirks was difficult to cope with, especially since it had been created by a group of villains. They were unsure how the multiple quirks had been implanted into the subject, but no other human DNA besides 𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗟𝗘's was found in it. 𝗏𝗏 nodded and leaned in closer, sharing a secret with Agent Mueller. Asked if she had ever heard the legend of All for One. Meanwhile, Herobrine was in his office, preparing for a meeting. He found Bub spinning in his chair and handed him a letter. Bub urged him to read it. The letter was from Lord Felix, who expressed his longing to establish a peace agreement between their peoples. Herobrine felt anxious as he awaited Felix's arrival, reflecting on the long-standing war that had lasted over 1,000 years. He wondered how the end of the conflict would affect his people. Suddenly, the doors swung open, and 6 armed guards entered, announcing Lord Felix Arvid-Ulf of 𝐀𝐮𝐭𝐡𝐨𝐫. Felix took his seat across from Herobrine, flanked by his guards. The atmosphere was tense as one of the guards aimed his trident at Herobrine, but Felix quickly intervened, apologizing for the guard's behavior. They began discussing the treaty, with Felix acknowledging the crimes of his predecessor and the disturbance it had caused among his people. As they continued their conversation, 𝐀𝐮𝐭𝐡𝐨𝐫 nervously tapped her fingers against the table at a dinner party she and 𝐀𝐮𝐭𝐡𝐨𝐵 had organized. They had invited the Todorokis, Bakugous, UA staff, and several family friends to make an important announcement. 𝐀𝐮𝐭𝐡𝐨𝐫 sighed, feeling anxious about the news they were about to share. 𝐀𝐮𝐭𝐡𝐨𝐵 waved down their friends as they approached, and the atmosphere was filled with curiosity. Back in Herobrine's office, he and Felix spoke for several hours, making agreements and discussing terms of ceasefire. They agreed to open trade between their nations, and Felix revealed that his empire had also opened trade with another group from an alternate dimension. Herobrine was intrigued by this development, realizing it could lead to many opportunities for both their peoples. The man on the phone sighed before explaining to Mitsuki that someone had broken into the hospital the previous night and released several patients, including her daughter. Mitsuki's face drained of color as she realized the implications. Panic surged through her as she rushed back into the restaurant. Izumi sat quietly at her table, scrolling through her phone while waiting for her food. 𝐻𝐿, enjoying her 7th croissant roll, asked David about his current project. He shared that a colleague had discovered a method to synthesize a dimensional rift, which could allow for teleportation and travel to different dimensions. This advancement could enable heroes to respond to emergencies almost instantly. Melissa chimed in, mentioning her work on stabilizing the portal, but they had encountered some difficulties. Izumi suggested introducing her friend 𝐀𝐮𝐴 from the support course, who might have innovative ideas. Melissa expressed her eagerness to meet 𝐀𝐻, unaware that Izumi had a risky idea that could potentially disrupt reality itself. Mitsuki burst into the dining room, nearly colliding with her son Bakugou. She quickly downed a glass of wine and announced that Katsumi had escaped. The room fell silent, shock washing over everyone. Izawa questioned the situation, while little Hanako, smeared with pureed peaches, reacted to the mention of her mother by crying. Masaru picked up the distressed child, trying to soothe her as the adults exchanged worried glances. David sought clarification, and Mitsuki informed him that Katsumi had escaped from the mental hospital, turning her gaze angrily toward 𝐀𝐮𝐭𝐡𝐨𝐵. Meanwhile, Herobrine stood at a podium, addressing his people. He acknowledged the anxiety surrounding his recent meeting with Lord Felix of 𝐀𝐿𝐵 and assured them that the outcome would bring peace. He declared that the war, which had claimed billions of lives, was over. The crowd listened intently as he spoke of a peace treaty that had been signed, marking a turning point in their history. The announcement ignited cheers and tears of joy among the citizens of the collectivist empire. Charlotte, Bruja, and Eri rushed to embrace Herobrine, expressing their gratitude and relief at the end of the conflict. Back in the restaurant, David confronted 𝐀𝐮𝐭𝐡𝐨𝐵, furious for not sharing critical information about his nephew. 𝐀𝐮𝐭𝐡𝐨𝐵 struggled to explain, but David's anger boiled over. Izawa intervened, wrapping his scarf around 𝐀𝐮𝐭𝐡𝐨𝐵's mouth to silence him. The revelation that Izuku had returned left David momentarily stunned, prompting confusion as he processed the news. Nizu, attempting to lighten the mood, tossed a bread roll at 𝐀𝐮𝐭𝐡𝐨𝐵, confirming the truth of the situation. Izuku found himself transported to another dimension where he became the king of a peculiar group. Shoka shared this revelation, prompting a sharp glare from Rei, who dismissed the idea as absurd. She expressed her disbelief, recalling a time when she was offered a patent for diet water. Izumi, however, insisted on the truth, showing DNA test results on her phone to support her claim. Melissa, intrigued yet skeptical, questioned Izumi's motives for asking about the portal. Izumi quickly denied any ulterior motives, but Melissa was not convinced. She pointed out that Izumi had never shown interest in her inventions before. The tension escalated as Melissa accused Izumi of lying, leading to a moment of silence in the room. Inko felt a wave of emotion as she listened to her daughter's harsh words. Suddenly, the quiet was shattered when Melissa struck Izumi, sending her reeling. The confrontation intensified as Melissa continued to assert her demps. Meanwhile, Katsuki stood outside the door, clenching his fists in frustration, reflecting on how Izuku had somehow managed to survive. As he sent a message to the chairwoman, he couldn't help but feel a mix of annoyance and intrigue about the situation. The story would continue to unfold, with more information to come in the next chapter, which would include details about flags and maps from the vast collectivist empire. The narrative hinted at the introduction of various biomes and creatures from a popular game, adding depth to the world Izuku now inhabited. ABHV-2, Shadow of Death, is a heavy bomber, gunship, torpedo bomber, and interdictor. It boasts a top speed of 600 km per hour, a maximum takeoff weight of 30,000 kilograms, and a rate of climb of 300 meters per minute. The aircraft is armed with 11 3mm guns. ASC-V2, Stalker, serves as a reconnaissance, surveillance, and airborne early warning system. It has a top speed of 395 km per hour, a rate of climb of 825 meters per minute, and a maximum takeoff weight of 250 kilograms. The Stalker is equipped with a utility pistol, a combination gun, and possibly a few rockets, with retractable wheels for enhanced maneuverability. ACV-4, Parasol, functions as a maritime patrol, anti-submarine, anti-ship, search and rescue, torpedo bomber, and gunship. It can reach a top speed of 435 km per hour, has a maximum takeoff weight of 25,000 kilograms, and a rate of climb of 425 meters per minute. ACC-V3R1, Guardian, is designed for cargo and transportation. It features a top speed of 625 km per hour, a rate of climb of 350 meters per minute, and a maximum takeoff weight of 32,000 kilograms, essentially serving the same purpose as the ABH but for cargo transport. The Overworld class aerial cruiser measures 175 meters in length and is equipped with 40 3mm anti-aircraft guns, 8 155mm turrets, 1 250mm twin turret, and 12 bomb ports. It can reach a top speed of 200 km per hour, has a maximum takeoff weight of 1,250 metric tons, and a hull thickness of 90 millimeters, requiring a crew of the 𝗧𝗏-class aerial corvette is a 75-meter rigid airship armed with 4 155mm twin turrets and 8 bomb ports. It has a top speed of 350 km per hour, a maximum takeoff weight of 350 metric tons, and a hull thickness of 50 millimeters, necessitating a crew of the 𝗧𝗏-class aerial frigate spans 140 meters and is equipped with 6 155mm twin turrets, 2 3mm twin aircraft guns, and 10 bomb ports. It can reach a top speed of 190 km per hour, has a hull thickness of 65 millimeters, and a maximum takeoff weight of 500 metric tons, requiring a crew of the 𝗧𝗏𝗧-class aerial gunship is a 100-meter rigid airship armed with 3 twin 250mm turrets, 4 155mm twin turrets, 3 3mm anti-aircraft guns, and 6 bomb ports. It has a top speed of 270 km per hour, a maximum takeoff weight of 425 metric tons, and a hull thickness of 75 millimeters, with a crew of the Eclipse-class aerial battleship measures 215 meters and is armed with 3 four-barreled 300mm guns, 2 250mm twin turrets, 12 155mm twin turrets, and 24 bomb ports. It has a maximum speed of 145 km per hour, a maximum takeoff weight of 750 metric tons, and a hull thickness of 100 millimeters, requiring a crew of the 𝗧𝗏-class aerial aircraft carrier is a 175-meter rigid airship armed with 4 155mm twin turrets, 3mm turrets, and approximately 70 fighter planes. It can reach a top speed of 200 km per hour, has a hull thickness of 50 mm, and a maximum takeoff weight of 500 metric tons, requiring a crew of 75, excluding pilots. The Collectivist Standard Compressor Model 3 with tank is a modified rifle capable of emitting fire or gas. With a self-sealing tank mounted directly to the rifle, it minimizes the risk to the user in case of rupture, boasting an effective range of 30 meters. The Collectivist Standard Grenadier Model V is a 12-shot gas-operated revolving grenade launcher chambered in 40 by 100 mm shells, capable of firing at 75 rounds per minute with a range of 300 meters. The Collectivist Standard Utility Pistol Model I is a single-shot 40 mm pistol that can fire flares, grappling hooks, encrypted messages, tracking devices, and non-lethal rounds. It has an effective range of 150 meters and a rate of fire of 20 rounds per minute. The Collectivist Standard Pump-Action Shotgun Model 7 is a simple pump-action shotgun chambered in 20 by 125 shotgun shells, with a capacity of 6 rounds, a rate of fire of 16 rounds per minute, and a range of 75 meters. The Collectivist Standard Socket Bayonet is a 10-inch bayonet designed for maximum PNTRTN power. Many soldiers modify it for increased effectiveness. The Collectivist Standard Semi-Automatic Carbine is a blowback-operated open-bolt intermediate rifle used primarily by cavalry, infantry leaders, and marksmen. Chambered in 6.5 by 42, it has a rate of fire of 100 rounds per minute, a capacity of 10 rounds, and an effective range of 500 meters. The Collectivist Standard Combination Gun is a revolving shotgun with a straight pull rifle attached to the underside and a removable bayonet. The shotgun has 6 shots, an effective range of 30 meters, and a rate of fire of 30 rounds per minute. The rifle has an effective range of 300 meters, a rate of fire of 45 rounds per minute, and uses the same magazine as the CS bar, primarily utilized by pilots, scouts, and for trench clearance. The Collectivist Standard Aircraft Machine Gun is a 13.3 mm air-cooled machine gun featuring a roller-delayed blowback system, detachable belt holder, and downward-facing ejection. It has an effective firing range of 2,200 meters and a rate of fire of around 1,200 rounds per minute, primarily used on aircraft but also adapted for other uses. The Collectivist Standard Potion Grenade is a 250 milliliters canister of compressed potion particles that creates a 10-meter cloud of gas. It is reusable, and the canisters can be attached to arrows. The Collectivist Standard Heavy Artillery, Marksman, is a 155 mm breech-loading rifled cannon with a range of 12 kilometers and a rate of fire of 12 rounds per minute. The Collectivist Standard Heavy Howitzer, Vacuum Gun, is a 250 mm breech-loading smoothbore cannon with a rate of fire of 4 rounds per minute and a range of 10 kilometers, utilizing experimental vacuum pistons to manage recoil. The Collectivist Standard Heavy Mortar, the Shaker, is a 500 mm breech-loading cannon weighing approximately 70 metric tons. It requires significant resources to move and has a rate of fire of 1 round per minute with a range of 15 kilometers. The Collectivist Standard Rocket Gun is a 13-barreled 125 mm breech-loading smoothbore gun, capable of firing 26 rounds per minute with a range of 15 kilometers. The Collectivist Standard Protection Mask Model 2 is a netherite-plated steel mask featuring a bulletproof glass visor, detachable filters, night vision, and a 45-degree viewing angle. It can utilize charcoal filters or air tanks, with the glass made from amethyst, concentrated slime adhesive, and tempered glass. The Collectivist Standard Field Jacket is a knee-length jacket made from wool and silk, with an outer layer of stone wool and an inner layer of dandelion RBB, providing waterproof and fireproof qualities. Tartan is the most popular camouflage among the 𝐒𝐮𝐬𝐴 paramilitary groups. The Collectivist Standard Utility Backpack, inspired by Izuku's yellow backpack, includes 7 added pockets, bandoliers on the straps, and straps for a sleeping bag or tent, made from treated canvas. The Collectivist Standard Combat Gauntlet is an elbow-length plated brigandine glove made from treated leather, steel, wool, and dandelion RBB. It features weighted knuckles, detachable fingers, and fingertip designs that allow for blocking small arms fire and most melee attacks. The collectivist standard combat gaiter consists of knee-height leg coverings made from treated leather, steel, wool, and poppy RBB. It includes wire mesh inside, internal padding, attachable spurs, and exterior steel plates, providing resistance to shrapnel, water, heat, small arms fire, and most melee attacks. The collectivist standard cavalry helmet resembles a turtle shell, made from steel with banded mail composite plates. The helmet had a deflective spike on top, a leather band inside for size adjustments, and a detachable face guard. It was a combination of a 𝐀𝐮𝐭𝐡𝐨𝐫 helmet and Mongol helmet. The collectivist standard exploration helmet was a light helmet made from woven bamboo and silk, featuring a detachable lamp, camera, and cup holders. The collectivist standard naval cap was crafted from treated wool with a felted brim, adorned with the Empire's roundel on the buttons holding the braid in place. The collectivist standard flight cap was made of treated leather with a rabbit fur interior, complete with foldable ear coverings, a leather brim, and a pair of goggles. For reference, the country itself measured approximately 135,872,205 square kilometers or 52,460,551. 6 square miles. 𝐴𝐻𝐼 Island was the collectivist version of the North Pole, home to polar bears, wolves, foxes, emperor penguins, royal penguins, goats, strays, and various icy creatures. The biomes included frozen oceans, jagged peaks, snowy slopes, and auroral gardens. Panda Reef was a small island surrounded by coral near 𝐴𝐻𝐼 Island, inhabited by pandas, red pandas, parrots, ocelots, and jungle creatures. Its biomes featured jungles, bamboo forests, and sacred springs. Moss Lake was a large lake teeming with dolphins, pufferfish, and tropical fish. Its biomes included oceans, coral reefs, and sandy beaches. The feline colony, once home to cats deemed barbaric to eradicate, was relocated to a small uninhabited island in Moss Lake, now under the ownership of 𝐀𝐮𝐭𝐡𝐨𝐫. The island was home to cats, rabbits, and other small animals. Maze Canyon consisted of a series of ravines and tunnels, with biomes ranging from savannas to badlands. It was inhabited by foxes, rabbits, and various creatures. Spindleberg was a vast forest on a mountain range, home to numerous species, including spiders and other woodland animals. The Duchy of 𝐴𝐻𝐿, now controlled by 𝐁𝐮𝐬, featured diverse biomes and a variety of wildlife. Jordantander was a large mountain range surrounding a valley, with Mt Power as its tallest peak. It was home to goats, 𝐼𝐶𝐿𝐼𝐿 and other mountain-dwelling creatures. Forbidden Lake was considered taboo by the nearby Endermen, while Lake Torino was a tropical paradise named after Gran Torino, filled with vibrant marine life. Windcall Lake was a cold body of water, home to various aquatic creatures. Coven Island was known for housing the largest coven of witches in the Overworld, surrounded by mystical biomes. The Isle of Night, named after Sir Night-Eye, was home to a variety of animals and a pillager outpost. Boiling Rock was a penal island surrounded by magma blocks, creating a harsh environment. It was home to various creatures, including rabbits and marmots. The new group name for Herobrine's minions was the Tax Collectors. Herobrine took a sip of his drink as he watched 𝐴𝐻𝐼 happily chase Bub's pet pig, Lenny, while riding on the back of a Ravager. 𝐴𝐻𝐼 exclaimed how fast they were going, and Herobrine reminded her to be careful. The celebration of the war's end took place in the garden, with Dondrik, the castle chef, preparing a fine feast. Herobrine smiled, taking in the peace he had created. As soon as everyone was seated, Herobrine tapped his sword against the diamond chalice in his hand, silencing the conversation. He expressed his gratitude for everyone's support, acknowledging their contributions to the kingdom's peace. It had been a long 3 years since he had taken the throne, and the war had taken a tremendous toll. He expressed his gratitude to everyone for their support, acknowledging that he couldn't have achieved this without them. As the crowd cheered, he raised his voice to address them again. He turned to face the east, staring intently into the distance. He spoke of an uncharted world on the other side of the far lands, filled with unlimited potential for growth and discovery. With determination, he pointed his sword toward that land and declared that they were going to Terraria. Axel sighed as he studied the map presented to him by Arthos. He inquired about the location of the cultist base. Arthos pointed to a spot on the map, indicating where they had been attacked, suggesting the base was nearby. Axel noted that bandits usually had a defined area surrounding their base and only expanded when resources ran low. He asked if Arthos had taken that route before, to which Arthos replied that it had been 2 years since their last visit, before the cult began to spread. Curious about the cult's origins, Axel asked when it had started. Arthos explained that it had been around for a while, but it began spreading about a year ago, coinciding with the onset of a strange corruption that engulfed everything in a purple mold. Axel contemplated this for a moment before standing up and suggesting they take a walk outside the tent. He wanted to know more about what the cult worshipped. Arthos revealed that they worshipped an ancient monster named Cthulhu, seeking to reunite its parts and find a suitable host. Axel noted Arthos's extensive knowledge about the cult, which he attributed to the pamphlets they left everywhere. Suddenly, Axel drew his pistol and turned around, realizing they were ambushed. Meanwhile, Melissa shouted in frustration as Aizawa and Mike pulled her away from Izumi. Inko, tearfully intervening, questioned how Izumi could say such hurtful things after everything that had happened. She expressed her concern about Izumi's perception of her brother, Izuku, who was quirkless. David confronted Toshinori about his parenting, while Inko lamented her daughter's behavior. The tension escalated as Nizu jumped onto a table, demanding to know why they had gathered for such a dramatic confrontation. Inko wiped her tears and reassured Izumi that nothing had changed between her and Toshinori. Toshinori explained that since Izuku's death, their relationship had struggled, and now they were taking a break to work on their issues. Izumi, feeling the weight of the situation, quietly confided in her friends, Shoto and Shoka, that they needed to bring Izuku back to mend her parents' relationship. Meanwhile, Katsuki lurked silently in an alley behind the restaurant when a dark figure appeared beside him. Startled, he prepared to attack but recognized Lady Nagant. She informed him that the commission wanted confirmation about the information he had sent. She revealed that Izumi Yagi, All Might's daughter, had genetic test data suggesting that Herobrine might be Izuku Yagi. Katsuki confirmed that Izuku had a daughter named Hanako, who had suffered greatly. Lady Nagant pulled out her phone, showing him a video of a girl with spiky blonde hair and bright green eyes. Katsuki confirmed her identity and expressed his anger upon recognizing the people in the video as his parents. Lady Nagant noted the significance of this connection, indicating that they had the princess of a powerful empire almost within their grasp. Meanwhile, Gran Torino sang drunkenly into a karaoke microphone at a nearby bar, while Recovery Girl joined in, both enjoying the moment despite their inebriation. An audience member questioned the quality of their performance, but another noted that it was still more appropriate than Midnight's rendition of a popular song. As the story unfolded, it became clear that Izumi was the golden child of Aldra, not Bakugou, who acted out due to his own issues. The narrative hinted at various video game teams that acted as heroes in this world, leaving readers eager for more adventures to come. Herobrine clenched his fist as he stared at his paperwork, contemplating his next move. In a few days it would be Christmas. He had introduced his court to the concept, but few practiced it. He himself hadn't celebrated Christmas since his arrival in the Overworld, but since this was Aries' first official Christmas, he wanted to make it special. He called for his daughter, Eri, who looked up from her coloring book. When he asked if she knew what the day after tomorrow was, she replied that she didn't. He explained that once a year, people come together to celebrate and give each other gifts, which Eri thought sounded fun. Herobrine smiled and asked what she wanted for Christmas. Eri paused her doodling and said she didn't really want anything, just to spend it with him, her mother, and everyone else. Herobrine felt a surge of affection at her response, recalling how she had said something similar on her birthday. In a flashback, Bruja had asked Eri what she wanted for her birthday, and Eri had simply wanted her family to be there. Bruja had tried to offer her toys, clothes, and even a party, but Eri had insisted that all she wanted was for everyone to have fun. When Bruja mentioned cake, Eri's excitement grew, and she learned that Dondrik could make several apple cakes stacked high. Eri had danced with joy at the thought of cake. Back in the present, Herobrine looked at Eri with a mix of amusement and affection. He proposed a secret Santa gift exchange, which Eri found exciting. When she expressed concern about not having any money, Herobrine reassured her that he would provide it. Eri hugged him tightly, grateful for his support. Gathered in Herobrine's office were Eri, 𝐻𝗓𝗧, Charlotte, and the other members of Herobrine's court. Herobrine explained the rules of the secret Santa game, and everyone eagerly participated. As they drew names, some groaned while others smiled, each contemplating the gifts they would give. The excitement built as they realized Christmas was just 48 hours away, and they had a budget to stick to. Eri then asked if Hanako could come to the party. Herobrine thought it was a wonderful idea and decided to invite everyone, envisioning a grand Christmas celebration. Time passed, and Mitsuki, her husband and granddaughter arrived through the portal leading to the overworld. Hanako clapped with delight as they approached the manor. Mitsuki remarked on the unexpected experience of attending a Christmas party at a castle, while Masaru expressed relief that Katsuki was busy that night. As they entered, Kenichi offered to take their coats, causing a moment of surprise due to his appearance. 𝐻𝗓𝗧 reassured them, introducing herself warmly. Mitsuki introduced her family, and 𝐻𝗓𝗧 took a moment to cradle little Hanako, marveling at her tiny size. Meanwhile, Nizu sat comfortably on the couch with a cup of tea, enjoying the company of Java, the rabbit. He mused about visiting more often, scratching Java's neck as they shared a quiet moment together. Night Eye observed with amusement as Eri's pet ravager, Mr. 𝗀𝗱𝗡, attempted to nibble on a potted plant, wondering what kind of creature it was. He turned to Bub, who was nearby, seeking answers. "That's not an animal, it's a golem," someone remarked. Another asked if golems were like the clay creatures from stories. Curiosity filled the air as they discussed the various quirks of golems, with one person expressing surprise at their existence. Bub looked at Sir, pondering the different abilities golems might possess. Night Eye's eyes widened in realization, acknowledging the truth in Bub's words. Mirai then inquired about a blonde boy, to which Bub replied that his name was Mirio and he was doing well. Charlotte turned to Eri, asking if she was ready. Eri nodded, dressed up for the occasion, while Charlotte had something special planned for later. Herobrine had prepared a present for Eri, handing it to her with a smile. He reminded her that the party was for her, and she beamed in response. As Charlotte entered the room, Eri hid shyly behind her leg. Nizu approached, greeting them warmly and asking about the little girl hiding behind Charlotte. Herobrine encouraged Eri to say hello. Eri shyly waved to everyone, and Midnight exclaimed in delight at her cuteness, introducing herself as Auntie Nemi. Fuyumi, Present Mike, and Mitsuki joined in, cooing over Eri. Eri turned to her father, who encouraged her, and she asked if trick or treat was correct. Herobrine confirmed it, and Eri placed her gift by the towering spruce tree in the center of the room before returning to her family, clutching her father's leg. The atmosphere was joyful as they caught up. Fuyumi mentioned that Uncle Enji and Aunt Ray couldn't attend due to a mandatory hero charity ball. Herobrine nodded in understanding, and Tuya teased him about dressing up for the event, attributing it to Eri's puppy dog eyes. The excitement in the room grew as everyone prepared to enjoy the festivities. The evening was filled with games and activities. Eri and Hanako had Mr. 𝗀𝗱𝗡 pull them in a sled, which was adorable, and they even raced Nizu on the back of Goliath. Although they lost, the fun they had was what truly mattered. Bub entertained Tuya and Mo with an exaggerated tale of how he defeated Stain the hero killer, which they found hard to believe. Bub claimed he had lost an ear in the encounter, but when questioned, he insisted he had received a transplant. Meanwhile, Reaper was shaking the presents under the tree, prompting Blaster to chase him away to avoid any mishaps. Jeff observed the chaos, feeling a bit embarrassed as he enjoyed his 11th chorus fruit cocktail. Eri looked around at the smiling faces and the happiness surrounding her, feeling a warm glow as she hugged her father's leg. He picked her up and carried her to the snack table, asking if she was having fun. Eri replied that it was wonderful, and they exchanged heartfelt Christmas wishes. As the party wound down, Herobrine, Charlotte, and 𝐻𝗓𝗧 tucked Eri into bed. They bid her good night, and she happily reciprocated, curling up in her blanket with Mr. Snarly by her side. Mitsuki entered the room, marveling at how cute it was and expressing a longing for Hanako to sleep over. Masaru agreed, and Hanako eagerly raised her arms, ready to stay with her father for the night. Herobrine thanked everyone for coming as they began to leave, exchanging hugs and well wishes. Recovery Girl and 𝐀𝐮𝐭𝐡𝐨𝐫 expressed their gratitude, while SerratedSamurai mentioned he might visit when he had vacation days. Tuya carried a sleepy Mo out, and Present Mike joked about the hero ball being less enjoyable than the party. As they left, Fuyumi and Natsuo wrapped Herobrine in a hug, expressing their joy at the gathering. After everyone departed, Herobrine returned to his room, only to be taken aback by the sight of Bruja in a striking outfit and Charlotte playfully restrained on the bed. She greeted him with a mischievous smile, hinting at a playful surprise. Eri awoke the next morning, excitement bubbling within her as she remembered it was Christmas. She jumped out of bed and dashed down the hallway, bursting into the ballroom where her father awaited her with open arms. Herobrine embraced her, thrilled to see her enthusiasm, and they prepared to gather everyone for the gift opening. "Merry Christmas, Eri and Hanako," they said as the two girls settled on the floor. Eri joyfully exclaimed, "Merry Christmas, everybody," and ran to give everyone hugs. As for the gifts, the presents meant for the house of Herobrine could be suggested in the comments. Merry Christmas, everyone, and a Happy New Year. A quick question arose about the war between the Overworld and Japan. Which countries would be on which side, and why? Axel fired at a cultist before drawing his shashka and scanning the area. Gunshots echoed as his men battled the cult. Suddenly, a cultist lunged at the colonel, but Axel blocked the attack. Behind him, 𝐀𝐮𝐭𝐡𝐨𝐫 unsheathed his scimitar and swiftly incapacitated the cultist by severing his sword hand. The man cried out in pain as Axel quickly shot him. Axel then turned and took down two more cultists before sprinting toward a nearby tent. "Look out!" 𝐻𝐻 shouted, pushing Axel out of the path of an incoming arrow. Axel pivoted and aimed, taking out a cultist armed with a bow. More archers emerged as Axel and 𝐻𝐻 retreated. "Machine gun!" one of the cultists shouted as gunfire illuminated the night. Grizzly, ducking behind a crate, asked 𝐻𝐻 if they really knew what a machine gun was. "Yes, I had a quad barrel in my tent," Axel replied, staring at him. "Then go get it." "I'll cover you," he urged as he continued firing. 𝐻𝐻 nodded and dashed back to the tent. Meanwhile, Herobrine examined the map sent by the Expedition Corp, comparing it to his own map of the eastern end of the Overworld. "It all makes sense now," he remarked as he scrutinized the borders. "Charlotte, Bruja, someone, come take a look at this," he called out while measuring the coast. Charlotte, Bruja, Bub, Eri, and Goliath rushed in. Bub asked what was going on as he glanced at the table. Eri, standing on her tiptoes, wondered if it was a puzzle. "You're right, Eri," Herobrine acknowledged, lifting her onto his chair. "Do you see that inlet right there?" He pointed to the Overworld map. "Yes," she replied. "Now look at this," he said, indicating the map of Terraria. "Do you see that peninsula? They have the same shape," he explained, and Charlotte nodded. "Now, let's see what happens if we put them together. Bub, hand me those scissors, please." Bub complied as Herobrine began cutting. "Do any of you remember what used to be there?" he asked after finishing the cut. "A trail hub," Bruja recalled, contemplating Herobrine's idea. "Why would a trail lead directly into the ocean?" Bub pondered, scratching his forehead. Herobrine held the two maps together, whispering, "Perfect fit. If I'm right, which I usually am, the Overworld and Terraria were once one. This raises the question, why are they separate now?" Meanwhile, David pinched the bridge of his nose, trying to comprehend the situation. "So let me get this straight. Not only was Izuku reincarnated as the leader of a parallel universe, but he returned and you didn't think to tell us." Nizu explained that they had tried, but complications arose with All Might and Hurricane. They did their best to keep them from finding out, but Izumi and Shoka managed to piece it together. Melissa and David stared at Nizu from across his desk, having just learned that Herobrine was Izuku. "So Herobrine is Izuku?" Melissa asked. "Yes," Nizu confirmed, placing his cup down and sliding a folder across the table. David opened the folder, examining the contents while handing the papers he finished to Melissa. The DNA checks out, but Herobrine looks nothing like Izuku, he noted. Nizu explained that the 10 months Izuku was gone equated to 3 years for him, allowing for significant growth. He also mentioned the possibility of hair dyes in the overworld and that the freckles could be makeup. David nodded, questioning why Izuku hadn't informed them himself. Nizu pointed out that kings and emperors are often busy with politics, but during his visit, Izuku had given Nizu something to pass on. Nizu retrieved a package from his desk drawer, and David noticed the name on it was written in Izuku's handwriting. "Do you know what it is?" David inquired as he picked it up. Nizu smiled, assuring him it was something quite revolutionary. David then suggested inviting Herobrine to Island, and Nizu smiled in response. In the League of Villains bar, 𝐀𝐮𝐭𝐡𝐨𝐫 washed a glass as Shigaraki addressed the new members. In a few weeks, the students at UA will be heading to a forest training camp a few dozen kilometers from the nearest town. The others nodded in understanding. The new recruits included a girl in a school uniform with fangs and yellow eyes, a man resembling a lizard with purple hair and a mask, a tall woman with a large mouth and sunglasses, a man in a black suit, a man in a yellow coat and top hat, a boy wearing a gas mask and helmet, a large man in a red tank top with a glass eye, and a person wrapped in black leather. Suddenly, Katsumi Bakugou burst through the back door, exclaiming, "What the hell do you want now?" Shigaraki sighed, considering the chaos. "You didn't tell me you had extras coming over." The man in the red tank top stood up, towering over Katsumi, and warned her not to call him a loser again. Katsumi, ready to retaliate, prepared for a confrontation. Kurojirai intervened, suggesting they take their fight outside. Just then, the king of the underworld appeared on the screen, demanding to know why Shigaraki allowed the disruptive girl back in. Shigaraki explained that she had rushed in and provoked the new recruits. "Everybody leave," the king commanded. All for one requested to speak with Tamura privately as the others exited the room. He asked Tamura about their identity, to which Tamura replied that they were the League of Villains. All for one then inquired why Tamura had allowed a certain individual into their ranks. Tamura explained that she had harmed All Might's son, and he believed her presence would evoke trauma among the UA students. All for one side, acknowledging Tamura's reasoning but cautioning him that she was an unstable individual, guilty of a crime so severe that even he would not condone it. Tamura looked down, feeling the weight of shame. All for one emphasized the importance of the upcoming raid but insisted that Tamura must eliminate her afterward. Tamura agreed, acknowledging the unsettling nature of her obsession with All Might's successor. Suddenly, the bell above the door rang as a new customer entered the bar. Shigaraki approached the newcomer, telling them they were closed. The visitor clarified that they were not there for a drink, nor to turn them in, but rather seeking revenge on someone and wanted Shigaraki's help. As Shigaraki recognized the hero standing before him, he wondered what a hero was doing in such a place. Meanwhile, Adon reloaded his rifle as an arrow flew past him, fired by one of the cultists. He retaliated, taking down the attacker before targeting another. A cultist shouted in fury, but was swiftly silenced. Adon turned to see Colonel Grizzly wielding a powerful shotgun, dispatching cultists with brutal efficiency. One of the cultists ordered a retreat as their numbers dwindled. Grizzly commanded his team to pursue, spotting the cultist leader fleeing on horseback. Dr. Hades took aim and fired, hitting the leader in the shoulder, prompting a distant scream as they followed the trail of BLD that had urged Axel to prepare for reinforcements, emphasizing the uncertainty of the cult's numbers. Back at the bar, Shigaraki confronted the hero, who lamented their lost life as a hero and the sacrifices made. They slammed their fist on the bar, expressing their longing for revenge against the Hero Commission. Shigaraki scoffed, noting the irony of the hero seeking their help after being a pawn of the commission. The hero insisted that their training had been extensive, making them a valuable ally. Shigaraki agreed to consider the proposal, but demanded proof of loyalty. The hero confidently claimed that their past experiences could not compare to the commission's wrongdoings. The next morning, 𝐀𝐮𝐭𝐡𝐨𝐫 gathered his team, including the airship crew and additional allies from nearby towns, totaling around 187 fighters. 𝐀𝐮𝐭𝐡𝐨𝐫 and a small team followed the BLD trail and discovered a large blue building carved into the cliffside. 𝐀𝐮𝐭𝐡𝐨𝐫 speculated that the chest being moved by cultists was likely trapped. The group strategized, deciding to lure the cultists to their position rather than descending immediately. 𝐀𝐮𝐴 prepared a poison grenade, directing 𝐒𝐮𝐬𝐵 to ready the gas while 𝐶𝐻𝑒𝑠 and 𝐹𝐴𝐿𝑡𝑟 set up explosives. As the attackers took their positions, 𝐀𝐮𝐴 signaled for the operation to begin. He blew his horn, signaling an 𝐴𝐿𝑡𝑟 raid. The explosives detonated, sending debris cascading into the canyon and blocking the cultists' escape routes. As cultists rushed out, they were met with a hail of fire from the ranged fighters. Skeletons and zombies joined the fray, overwhelming the cultists. 𝐀𝐮𝐿𝐴𝐵 led the charge, ensuring Lupos escaped the poison. The witches donned gas masks and descended to join the battle, unleashing their firepower against the cultists as the tide of battle turned in favor of 𝐀𝐮𝐴𝐵's forces. She retrieved a pair of gas grenades and tossed them into the entrance. A piercing scream echoed as a loud explosion resonated from within the dungeon, releasing a cloud of dark green gas. Minutes passed without a single cultist emerging, while the skeletons and a few zombies stood ready, their weapons drawn. One cultist finally appeared, clutching their cloak to their face and raising a hand in surrender, but they fell before reaching the pillars. Suddenly, a deep growl reverberated, and a massive shape loomed behind the mist. 𝐀𝐮𝐴 called into his communicator, asking what was happening. 𝐀𝐮𝐴𝐵 responded that he didn't know. Before 𝐀𝐮𝐴𝐵 could react, a gigantic skull charged out of the dungeon, prompting a startled exclamation from him. David examined the red dust through a microscope, scratching his chin as he analyzed its composition. He cautiously placed a live wire onto the powder and jumped back as it ignited. After a closer inspection, he called for Melissa to come over. She approached and peered through the microscope, curious about the material. David explained that it was conducting electricity and showed her a large looping circuit he had found. He expressed excitement about its potential significance, noting that the blueprints were somewhat primitive but promising. As he connected the wire to the circuit, the dust began to glow, signaling that it was working. He asked Melissa to move the wire, and she complied, watching intently. When he requested a multimeter, she handed it to him, and he placed the probes onto the glowing dust. The meter buzzed, and David smiled, explaining the implications of their discovery. He connected a phone charger to the circuit, and it vibrated as it received power. Melissa gasped, realizing they had stumbled upon an infinite source of electricity. Meanwhile, Herobrine sat at Eri's playroom table, filling out paperwork while Eri colored a picture of a farm. She asked if Hanako would ever come to live with them, and he admitted he didn't know, his mood dampening. Eri hugged his arm, apologizing for making him sad. He reassured her that she hadn't done anything wrong, expressing his wish for her sister to stay with them but acknowledging the complications it would bring. A knock on the door interrupted them, and Kenichi entered, delivering a letter. Herobrine examined the logo before opening the envelope, revealing a small silver disc. A hologram of a white-haired man in a lab coat and glasses appeared, extending an invitation to the I-Island Expo on behalf of David and Melissa Shield. The hologram detailed security arrangements and accommodations, and Herobrine turned it off, explaining to Eri that it was an invitation to an important event. She pondered whether there would be a party, and he confirmed it would be a fancy one, requiring her to dress up. Eri agreed to go, and Herobrine left to find Bruja. He discovered Bruja in her study, observing a glowing blue liquid in a flask. He inquired if she was making something, and she awkwardly admitted she was testing a new type of potion. He informed her about the Science Expo invitation, and she eagerly expressed her longing to attend. He mentioned the event would take place the day after tomorrow, and she asked whether to prepare formal or casual attire. He suggested bringing both and reminded her to pack some weapons, sensing they might not be the only special guests. Charlotte was feeding the moss in her vivarium when Herobrine entered their room. She greeted him and asked about his paperwork, to which he sighed in response. He then mentioned the expo they were invited to, and she inquired about its nature. He explained it was a scientific event on the island where his uncle worked, and he expressed his longing to see his uncle and Melissa again. Charlotte perked up at the mention of the island's entertainment and shopping options and jumped onto the bed, asking if they would take everyone. He confirmed that it would be him, Eri, Bruja, and possibly Bub. Charlotte instructed Kenichi to prepare her suitcase. Meanwhile, the tax collectors were watching TV when Herobrine approached them, asking if they wanted to go to Island. They agreed enthusiastically. Toshinori took a deep breath as he stepped off the plane, with Izumi following closely behind. She hopped down the stairs, urging him to hurry. He expressed his reluctance about the trip, mentioning the tension between him and her father. She asked if Melissa would appreciate the apology gift he had brought, and he assured her she would. As he approached the gate, he reflected on how David had still invited him despite past issues, attributing it to the season passes he had secured. Inside the compound, people moved about the stores and buildings, excitement filling the air. Izumi turned to see Shoka running toward her. Shoka stopped in front of her, and Izumi expressed her excitement at seeing her friend. Shoka shrugged, reminding Izumi that they had talked that morning before pulling her away. Inko then reminded them not to wander off yet, as they hadn't checked in. Izumi learned that Shoto was also present, along with their mother and Natsuo, who had come because their father was busy and didn't want them alone. Izumi noted that she had seen Ida and Momo around as well. On the other side of the island, where more important guests came and went, an icy wind stirred as a black portal opened. Green specks danced around the miasma of the portal as security and travelers watched a tall man in a light blue shirt, jeans, and gray shoes step out, followed by a small group. The man from the invitation approached the young king, who towered over him, adjusting his glasses before bowing. He introduced himself as Dr. Elvin Gad, the chief scientific officer of Island, and offered to have an assistant show Herobrine to his hotel before giving him a grand tour. As they walked around the island, Dr. Gad presented a holographic map. He explained that the first district was dedicated to heroics and quirk study, where they created support gear and researched effective quirk usage. The second district was the residential area for scientists and their families, while the third was the business section. Herobrine inquired about the fourth section, which was for stores and entertainment, as well as other scientific pursuits like medicine and technology. Charlotte, holding Eri's hand, asked if they could stop in the shopping district first for lunch. Bruja interjected, stating that Professor Shield wished to speak with Herobrine. Dr. Gad led the group to David's laboratory, where David and Melissa awaited their arrival. They discussed the possibility of Izuku being Herobrine, with David expressing his doubts despite the DNA tests and information from Endeavor. When Herobrine entered, Dr. Gad advised him to keep his entourage close, as some curious minds might try to investigate them. Herobrine took a seat, and David asked if it was truly Izuku. Herobrine confirmed it and offered to prove it by recalling a specific childhood memory involving a birthday gift. Melissa was moved to tears as she realized the truth, and she embraced Herobrine, joined by David, who expressed his regrets for not being there for him. Herobrine reassured them, noting that they had their own lives to manage. David then asked if he could introduce some people, and Herobrine welcomed them inside. Eri hid behind Charlotte but slowly came out to introduce herself to Melissa, who knelt to speak with her. After introductions, Herobrine introduced his personal guards, who had unusual names. David found their names interesting and inquired about one of them, who revealed he didn't have a quirk. Meanwhile, Izumi and Shoka met Shoto at the training grounds, where they also encountered Kirishima. Shoka asked Kirishima what he was doing on Island, and he explained that Bakugou had brought him along. Izumi smiled at this, and the group moved to a nearby restaurant. As they sat down, Izumi picked up a menu, and Shoka called over a waiter. Kaminari appeared, and when Izumi asked what he was doing there, he mentioned that he and Mineta were working as waiters for extra money. Shoto interrupted the conversation, expressing his longing for cold soba, while Shoka followed up with a request for warm soba. Denki sighed as he took their orders, asking what Kirishima wanted. Kirishima, slightly annoyed, questioned Shoto's incessant chatter. Just then, a loud squeal filled the air as Mina joyfully tackled the two boys, exclaiming her surprise at seeing them. Kirishima managed to gasp for air before collapsing, pulling the others down with him. Mina released them and stood up, inquiring about their plans. They mentioned they were about to grab a bite to eat, and Mina excitedly shared her craving for a smoothie. She suggested they wait for Ochako, Bakugou, and Tsu to join them. Meanwhile, Bakugou received a notification on her phone from Mina, revealing that Bakugou and Kirishima were with her and planning to meet Izumi and the twins. Ochako smiled, eager to find them. They discussed the possibility of other classmates being on the island, dismissing the idea that the entire class would gather in one place outside of school. Aizawa sneezed, wondering if someone had uncovered his plan for some peace and quiet. After a brief time skip, the group discussed the recent raid on the Shai Hasaikai, the arrest of Eri's grandfather, and Overhaul's intentions with Eri. Melissa reacted strongly to the news, while David expressed his disbelief at Overhaul's lack of foresight regarding the consequences of his actions. He lamented the potential collapse of society due to the reliance on quirks. Herobrine chimed in, explaining Overhaul's twisted logic and the fate that awaited him. Melissa watched Eri play on the playground, concerned for her well-being. Herobrine reassured her that Eri was in therapy and on the path to recovery, though it would take time. They discussed the challenges Eri faced in her childhood and the strength she displayed. Melissa expressed her admiration for Herobrine's resilience in the face of adversity. Suddenly, Bub interrupted, announcing the arrival of the Yagis on the island. Herobrine sighed, realizing the complications this could cause. He instructed Bub to keep them at a distance while they enjoyed their time. Eri tugged at Melissa's breathed leg, eager to explore. Her father agreed, and Eri cheered, asking to be carried. Herobrine lifted her onto his shoulders as they made their way through the entertainment area, attracting the attention of onlookers. As they strolled through the shops, Melissa inquired about Hanako, expressing her fondness for the little girl. Herobrine shared that Hanako was doing well and had recently said her first word. He gestured for everyone to regroup in an hour, reminding them to stay safe and not to cause trouble unless necessary. Charlotte, Bruja, and Eri headed toward a nearby toy store. Eri's eyes lit up with excitement as she requested to go inside first. They entered the store, where the joyful sounds of children filled the air. Eri smiled, taking in the vibrant atmosphere while Charlotte kept a watchful eye on her. Bruja ventured off to explore the science section, leaving the two girls to enjoy their time together. Eri pointed excitedly at a shiny red bicycle, her eyes sparkling with delight as she asked if they could get one. Charlotte smiled and agreed, but reminded Eri that she needed to wear a helmet. Eri nodded eagerly and began searching for one. Meanwhile, Bruja was at a scientific equipment store, examining laboratory glassware. She asked a nearby customer where the funnel drips were located, receiving directions to aisle 3 before moving on. While Herobrine chatted with his family and the girls continued shopping, the tax collectors decided to play laser tag. Bub took the lead as team captain, with Goliath as recon, Jeff as the assassin, SQR as the meat shield, Reaper as the heavy gunner, and Blaster as the taunt. They donned their light vests and entered the course. Bub began recounting a story, only to notice some patrons glaring at him for repeating himself. Jeff, readying his weapon, remarked that they had heard that story before. Reaper, eager for action, asked who was ready for a challenge. David inquired whether they should refer to Herobrine as Izuku or by his other name. Herobrine replied that either was fine, emphasizing that he was still their nephew at heart. David smiled and playfully fluffed Herobrine's hair, which Melissa also admired. Herobrine, feeling self-conscious, reminded them that they were in public and had an image to maintain. He then shifted the conversation to the redstone he had sent them, answering David's questions about its origin and safety. David listened intently, calculating its value, while Melissa took notes on its properties and effects on wildlife. As the night of the 𝐸xpo arrived, David's assistant, Sam, searched for him among the guests. He adjusted his tie nervously while scanning the crowd, spotting David setting up the VIP table. Just as he was about to approach, the doors burst open, and a group of unusual figures entered the room, drawing gasps from the audience. Herobrine greeted David and took a seat at the table, while Sam felt a wave of anxiety wash over him, hoping nothing chaotic would unfold. Herobrine pulled out a chair for 𝐻𝐻𝐻𝐿, who thanked him as she settled in. 𝐴𝐻𝐿𝐿 and 𝐵𝐻𝐻 took their places beside him, while the tax collectors stood guard around the table. As David approached the podium to address the crowd, an alarm suddenly blared, and masked individuals stormed in, causing panic. Light blue tentacles emerged from the tables, ensnaring the heroes. Herobrine, with a hint of sarcasm, commented on the arrival of more villains while sipping his sparkling apple juice. The tax collectors quickly drew their weapons and flipped a table for cover, returning fire at the masked intruders. Jeff teleported 𝐻𝐻𝐻𝐿 and 𝐵𝐻𝐻 to safety before rejoining the fray. Bub brandished his sword, swiftly incapacitating one of the attackers. 𝐬𝐿𝐻, unharmed, retaliated by spitting bullets back at his assailant, distracting him long enough for 𝐬𝐻𝐻 to tackle him. Reaper unleashed a barrage of fire from his weapons, taking down several of the attackers. One villain threatened a civilian, but Jeff intervened, disarming him and using him to fend off the others. As chaos erupted, Goliath's exoskeleton absorbed bullets, and he charged at an attacker, causing panic. Blaster, surrounded and outnumbered, warned that he would explode, prompting the villains to back away. He then detonated, blowing open the doors and creating an escape route. While the guards battled the intruders, Herobrine and 𝐴𝐻𝐿𝐿 worked to free the captured heroes and help evacuate civilians. Herobrine reluctantly severed the restraints binding the Yagis, reminding them that they were fortunate to be in a crisis, or he would have left them behind. 𝐶𝐻𝐿 nodded in gratitude before rushing off to assist with the evacuation. One of the henchmen attempted to fire at Herobrine, only for a dagger to strike him in the throat before exploding. The other attackers turned to see 𝐴𝐻𝐿𝐿, armed with several more exploding daggers. Bub shouted as Herobrine noticed the leader of the armored men aiming his gun at David and Sam. He rushed at the man, but another henchman with swords for hands tried to intercept him. Herobrine swiftly bisected the man before attempting to stab the leader. The leader ducked just in time, narrowly avoiding Herobrine's sword. Herobrine swung again, knocking the man to the ground, his mask shattering to reveal a scarred face. As Herobrine swung downward, the leader used various pieces of silverware and metal scraps to shield himself while Herobrine hacked away. The leader rolled aside as the sword sliced through the makeshift shield. He jumped to his feet, attempting to flee, only for 𝐴𝐻𝐿𝐿 to hit him in the shoulder. He cried out as his arm was injured. The leader slipped on a puddle before falling to the ground, with the young king pointing his sword at his throat. Someone advised against killing him as Herobrine placed his foot on the villain's sternum. He turned to see Melissa approach, along with David and Sam. David asked if the villain was done, and the man nodded weakly. Herobrine warned the leader that he was lucky this time. Had he been prepared, he and his men would never have made it into the building. Suddenly, a large purple figure crashed into Herobrine, grabbing the leader, Sam, and David. Another man enlarged his hands, trying to go for Melissa, but Herobrine severed one of his fists, causing the man to cry out in pain. Herobrine watched indignantly as the purple figure leaped through the ceiling. He turned to Melissa and instructed her to disable the security droids and ensure nothing else had been broken into while he went to find her father and Sam. He directed Bub and Jeff to accompany her, Goliath to disable security near the civilians, and Reaper, 𝐬𝐻𝐻𝐿, and Blaster to handle the remaining insurgents. 𝐴𝐻𝐿𝐿 was tasked with checking on 𝐻𝐻𝐻𝐿 and 𝐵𝐻𝐻 to ensure everyone was accounted for. They all affirmed their assignments before setting off. Melissa asked if he was sure he could manage, and Herobrine confidently replied that he still had tricks up his sleeve. He summoned his shield and crossbow, tossing the crossbow to Melissa before heading to the hole in the ceiling. A group of heroes tried to stop him, insisting he needed to stay with the civilians. Herobrine glared at them, causing one to shrink back, and told them to help the civilians while he handled the situation. He then teleported upward. On the 187th floor, David shouted in frustration as Wolfram tended to the stub that used to be his arm. Wolfram mocked David, questioning his expectations. Sam, feeling guilty, handed a briefcase to Wolfram. David tried to intervene, but Sam cut him off, expressing his resentment for not receiving recognition for his work while David basked in the spotlight. Wolfram opened the briefcase and pulled out a pistol, firing it at Sam. David rushed to Sam's side as he fell, crying out in alarm. Wolfram began to taunt David, but a loud scraping noise interrupted him. They turned to see a pair of glowing white eyes attached to a silhouette illuminated by the enchanted sword he held. Wolfram shouted for his men to attack as they fired at Herobrine. Suddenly, the lights went out, and the eyes shot forward. One of the armed assailants was silenced as his head fell from his body. More attackers fell as Herobrine moved with incredible speed, limbs and heads flying through the air. One fighter, whose quirk granted him night vision, fired at Herobrine, who grabbed a nearby goon and used him as a shield before dispatching the villain. Groans and surprised shouts filled the air as Herobrine finished his foes with such speed that none managed to scream. As the last goon fell, Herobrine turned to Wolfram, grinning, with the bodies of the henchmen creating an ominous backdrop. Wolfram opened the briefcase, trying to retrieve the device inside, but Herobrine kicked him in the chest and snatched it midair. He asked Wolfram if he was ready to give up, radiating an aura of malice that even the presence of All for One could not match. David was shocked by how terrifying his nephew had become. Daigo activated his quirk and charged at Herobrine, who dodged the attack. Daigo tried again, but Herobrine blocked it with his shield. Daigo screamed in pain as the effects of Thorn's 𝐶𝐶LV took hold, white lines appearing on his body. Herobrine warned him that the more he fought back, the more it would hurt, and soon Daigo fell lifelessly. Herobrine approached Wolfram, demanding answers. He warned that what he would do if Wolfram didn't surrender in 10 seconds would be far worse than anything the heroes or the justice system could inflict. Wolfram's eyes widened in fear as Herobrine smiled smugly, stating that sometimes, one simply could not win. In a desperate move, Wolfram raised his pistol, aiming it at David and claiming that if he died, David would too. He was cut off as an arrow pierced his sternum, and Melissa shouted that he should leave her father alone as she fired Herobrine's crossbow. David called out to Melissa, who rushed to embrace her father as he stood up. Sam also tried to rise, but Bub held him down. The two shared a moment of relief as Herobrine watched them, and Melissa turned to him, opening her arms wide. Herobrine smiled before joining in the hug. He expressed confusion about why Melissa hadn't asked for his help, noting that he could have influenced her sponsors in various ways. Melissa admitted it was a lapse in judgment. David sighed and questioned why she had kept it from them. Melissa explained that 𝐻𝗃 was growing weaker, and despite their falling out, she believed Japan couldn't survive without its symbol of peace. This led her to create the quirk amplifier. Melissa frowned at the thought of the amplifier falling into the wrong hands. David pointed out that it was a risk she had taken, believing that it would be difficult for anyone to steal from All Might. He wanted the war against All for One to end quickly, realizing that One for All had likely reached a critical point. He expressed concern that the boy's new quirk could lead to his demise, which he found tragically poetic. Herobrine suggested creating a counter-device to weaken or cancel quirks instead of amplifying them. David acknowledged the idea but noted the ongoing threat of villains capturing such a device. Herobrine countered that living without quirks was possible, as humanity had done so for thousands of years. Melissa raised a concern about heroes being affected, to which Herobrine replied that if someone couldn't be a hero without a quirk, they shouldn't be a hero at all. Time passed, and Herobrine stood before the crowd at the I-Island Expo. It had been 24 hours since the failed invasion, and the media was eager for answers. He invited questions from the audience, and several hands shot up. One reporter asked about a new fuel source introduced to I-Island, which Herobrine confirmed was called Redstone, leaving further details to Professor Shield. Another reporter inquired about the fate of Wolfram, the leader of the villains. Herobrine confirmed that it was true, explaining it was an act of self-defense. When asked about the Overworld, he described it as a parallel plane of existence that didn't align with Earth's physics. A reporter then asked about his quirk, to which Herobrine stated that he didn't possess one, revealing that the entire population of the Overworld was quirkless. The audience fell silent, and one reporter expressed disbelief. Herobrine clarified that being quirkless did not equate to being powerless or weak. When pressed for clarification, He ominously suggested they should hope to never find out what that meant before leaving the stage. As he exited the building, he asked Charlotte how she thought the event had gone and whether reporters were always that bothersome. She confirmed that they usually were, and they teleported away. Around the world, reactions varied to the news that the Emperor of the Overworld and his citizens lacked quirks. At UA's cafeteria, 𝐀𝐮𝐬𝐴 shared the surprising revelation that the hero who had saved them was quirkless. Denki speculated that Herobrine's weapons might be magical, while Mina recalled that he had come from another dimension, suggesting they might have something similar to quirks. Tsu mentioned seeing unusual beings, and Tokoyami chose not to discuss his experience. At Detnerat corporate headquarters, 𝐴 listened to curious summary of Herobrine's interview. He pondered the implications of a quirkless society and concluded that Herobrine must have some hidden strength. He instructed Trumpet to use his connections to gather more information about Herobrine and to seek an interview with Melissa. At HPSC headquarters, the chairwoman paused her computer screen, absorbing the implications of Herobrine's announcement regarding the Overworld's lack of quirks. The conclusion was clear: they had no defense against quirks, and their technology was reminiscent of the 1920s. One member of the commission expressed concern about access to their world. The chairwoman smiled, assuring them she had her ways. Doubts lingered in the room as they recalled the disastrous outcomes of past decisions. Even if they managed to create a new empire, the world would not respond positively. They reflected on the chaos that ensued whenever America intervened in foreign conflicts. The chairwoman frowned, stating they needed a reason to invade. One outspoken member stood up, voicing his opposition, but before he could finish, a sudden eruption of chaos ensued as Lady Nagant emerged from the shadows, her weapons still smoking. She announced that they only needed to replace the Prime Minister and asked who among them would take the role of Hero Commissioner. The remaining members eagerly raised their hands, but the chairwoman dismissed them, revealing she had already chosen her successor and gestured for the newcomer to enter. In the Oval Office, President Stephen Armstrong reviewed footage before sending a memo to his secretary, requesting a meeting with Herobrine. When informed that Herobrine was in Cancun for a family wedding, the president expressed frustration but insisted on the meeting, citing personal curiosity. At the Humorize base, Flecht analyzed information presented by a follower. He pondered the truth of the reports regarding Herobrine and his world, noting the lack of quirks there. He speculated about the potential of their quirks functioning in the overworld and expressed a longing to find out, contemplating the implications for their plans. Meanwhile, as Herobrine and Charlotte approached the gates of their manor, she questioned the wisdom of revealing their quirkless status to the world. Herobrine explained his longing to gauge the reaction, confident in his preparations against potential threats from quirk supremacists. Herobrine sat on his throne, reflecting on the world leaders who had contacted his new embassy in Tokyo regarding his statement about their lack of quirks. He reviewed the list of invitations from various countries, considering which leaders to meet. Charlotte suggested they had already met with Japanese dignitaries and discussed the challenges posed by other nations. In another part of the world, news broke of a commission member found dead in what was reported as a villain attack. Nizu, reviewing the news, suspected foul play, particularly since the member had been openly critical of the commission's practices. He approached Izuku, who was unaware of the incident, and expressed his concerns about a potential cover-up. 2 days later, President Armstrong met with Herobrine, who had teleported directly to Washington, D.C. The president acknowledged the tension with the British government, noting their displeasure over Herobrine's sudden emergence as a powerful entity. Herobrine listened as Armstrong explained the aftermath of the Quirk War, where countless lives were lost and major cities were devastated. In the aftermath of the destruction, various groups emerged to dominate the wasteland, but one in particular continued to pose a significant threat. The president presented a folder to the king, revealing the existence of Caesar's Legion, a group notorious for trafficking and forced LBR, targeting quirks, quirkless individuals, and mutants alike. Herobrine clenched his fist, expressing his concern about their peculiar obsession with the Roman Empire, including their tactics and architectural style. He suggested that the king send some of his warriors to train their heroes to counter these methods, recalling that the king had faced similar challenges before. Herobrine smiled, confident in their ability to fight back. Meanwhile, 𝐀𝐮𝐭𝐡𝐨𝐫 felt a sense of pride. Her daughter excelled at 𝐶I Academy, and her husband held a prominent position in the national diet. With her growing military and political career, she had been approached by the chairwoman of the HPSC about potentially succeeding her as prime minister. Although the chairwoman had not yet assumed the role, the conversation was promising. 𝐀𝐮 expressed gratitude for the meeting and took a seat across from the chairwoman, who spoke of a colleague from abroad with aligned goals. 𝐀𝐮 nodded, acknowledging the potential alliance should their international intervention in China lead to conflict. The chairwoman shared that the details were confidential, revealing that the group was significant. Back with Herobrine, cameras flashed as Stephen Armstrong shook his hand, marking the beginning of diplomatic relations between the collectivist empire and the United States. Herobrine reminded Armstrong of the importance of strength, noting that even the strongest could end up alone. Armstrong smiled, appreciating the sentiment as he turned to address the audience. Herobrine watched the dignitary through the monitor as they discussed the arrangements for the foreign diplomat's visit, confirming that they would be skirted by international heroes and armed security. He agreed to provide accommodations while conducting random security checks, emphasizing the need for caution. As the dignitary exited, 𝐴𝐵 entered, holding 2 apple fritters. She offered one to Herobrine, who thanked her and enjoyed the treat while asking about her school. 𝐴𝐵 shared that she was doing well, especially in spelling, and they shared a tender moment before she hugged him. After weeks of negotiations, Herobrine and the UN reached an agreement for the visiting ambassadors from Japan, the United States, China, Germany, Mexico, the UK, and France. Members of the international hero team, Overwatch, would SERT them. Herobrine reviewed the list of heroes selected for the task, feeling satisfied with the choices made. The airship carrying the ambassadors and heroes landed outside the mansion Herobrine had provided. The American ambassador, Greg Short, marveled at the size of the mansion, while another Overwatch member teased him about his living situation. Herobrine appeared dramatically, having waited for their arrival. He welcomed them to 𝐴𝐵 Manor, equipped with modern utilities, and expressed hope that they would find the accommodations satisfactory. He also shared that he had displayed some art from his private collection to help them understand the overworld's customs. Before leaving, he cautioned them not to break anything and informed them he would join them for dinner later. Meanwhile, the Hero Commission chairwoman met with representatives from various countries involved in the HPSC's efforts to reunify Japan. She informed them of the ambassador's trip to the overworld and speculated on whether Herobrine would be willing to negotiate territory. While it seemed unlikely, she hinted at a bargaining chip that could change the situation. She revealed her plan, introducing the concept of Operation Helldivers. At UA, 𝐀𝐮𝐭𝐡𝐨𝐫 reviewed paperwork with Bub, who inquired about the purpose of the equipment they were handling. 𝐀𝐮𝐭𝐡𝐨𝐫 reassured Bub of Herobrine's good leadership, emphasizing his qualities beyond their personal connection. The war would have never ended without him. Unfortunately, that was not always the case. On Earth, there had been regular problems with corrupt leaders, those who strong-armed their way into power and cared more about money and their own egos than the people they were meant to serve. Bub listened intently as 𝐀𝐮𝐭𝐡𝐨𝐫 continued, expressing concern about the Hero Commission. He suspected that if one could trust the HPSC for anything, it was their corrupt, underhanded practices. 𝐀𝐮𝐭𝐡𝐨𝐫 intended to put a stop to whatever was brewing if his hand was forced. Bub nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation. 𝐀𝐮𝐭𝐡𝐨𝐫 mentioned that the items Bub had brought were precautions in case something arose that required more than heroes to confront. After a respectful bow, Bub took his leave. Several blocks from UA, Bub wandered down the street, observing the various tourist traps and shops. Pedestrians moved aside, casting confused and somewhat disgusted glances in his direction, which he ignored. As he ventured into a rougher part of 𝐴𝐵, where few dared to tread at that hour, he suddenly felt a sharp sting in his arm. Raising an eyebrow, he pulled a tranquilizer dart from his bicep, bewildered by the attack. Before he could react further, more darts struck him. Armed assailants quickly surrounded him, and as he reached for his weapon, a sack was thrown over his head. A blunt object struck him, and he succumbed to unconsciousness. The assailants dragged him away, loading him into a large black truck before driving off. Despite the absence of a license plate, the logo on the vehicle made it clear that Bub had been kidnapped by the Umbrella Corporation, while the Empire of Japan was using the Helldivers to invade the Minecraft overworld. Bridget Lindholm placed her suitcase in the closet of her room, assessing the accommodations that Herobrine had provided. Mercy, staying in the adjacent room, asked her opinion. Bridget found it nice and picked up a pamphlet from the nightstand. As she skimmed through it, she noted various sections about the overworld's population and social etiquette. Mercy revealed that she had also received one of the pamphlets, explaining that it was meant to facilitate better communication with the locals and to avoid offending anyone in public. In the living room, several ambassadors discussed the unfolding events. One remarked on the vastness of the overworld, never before seen by modern eyes, but quickly grew bored. Another ambassador, Ian, expressed disbelief at his impatience, while Greg decided to take a walk in search of something interesting. In the library, 4 of the 8 Overwatch agents were engaged in conversation about the books they were reading. Winston shared that players had appeared in the overworld between 2,500 and 1,200 years ago. Curious, May asked where they had come from, and Winston explained that they hailed from various ancient civilizations. He grew increasingly intrigued and expressed his longing to uncover more about this mystery. Later, the ambassadors and Overwatch heroes gathered at the dining hall table, joined by Herobrine's family and court members. Herobrine entered, apologizing for the delay due to unexpected paperwork, and inquired about everyone's adjustment to their new surroundings. Winston seized the opportunity to ask about a passage he had read, which stated that Earth people had stopped appearing in the overworld around a millennium ago. Herobrine admitted he did not know why but mentioned a particular library in one of the player kingdoms that housed the cumulative knowledge of both the overworld and the players. The heroes and ambassadors listened intently as he likened it to the Library of Alexandria, suggesting it might hold answers to their questions. Just then, Dondrick entered with 2 carts of food, prompting relief among the guests. As he unloaded the feast, Cinny noticed a spit-roasted pig and turned to her neighbor, Razorback, asking if it would be considered cannibalism for him. Razorback shrugged, clarifying that it was quite different, likening it to a human eating another human. 𝐀𝐮𝐬𝐽 sank his mandibles into his silk-wrapped roast, catching 𝗧𝗏𝗏𝐿's attention, who watched with curiosity. 𝐀𝐮𝐬𝐽 then addressed him, startling the inventor, who politely declined any assistance. He was surprised that she could speak and glanced at the warden, who remained still. He wondered what was going on with him. 𝐀𝐮𝐬𝐽 explained that the warden couldn't talk, but she could. She added that she didn't make the rules. Suddenly, the warden placed his hand gently on 𝗧𝗏𝗏𝐿's head, patting him. He looked over at Bridget, who was sitting across from him, and silently asked for help. Mercy, curious, inquired about how the king's people lived. The king responded that their lives had improved since his ascension, thanks to recent infrastructure projects. He noted that before he established a unified government, the people lived in somewhat poor conditions. Mercy nodded as others began to listen to their conversation. The king continued, explaining that although he had received some complaints about the tax laws he implemented, his hands-on approach to government spending had made public education and mass transit nearly universal. Greg asked about law enforcement and emergency services. The king explained that these positions were mainly filled by professionally trained volunteers and that corruption in law enforcement was rare due to the systems he had put in place, which made corruption a risky endeavor. Winston, intrigued, asked what those systems were. Herobrine set down his fork and gestured for Bruja to cover Aries' ears. He acknowledged that the system he created to combat corruption in his government and law enforcement was somewhat similar to what was mandated for samurai during the Edo period, based on his readings. 𝐀𝐮𝐭𝐡𝐨𝐫 paled at the implication of what he had said. Ian, trying to steer the conversation in a different direction, asked about heroes, noting that they didn't have quirks but were still curious. Herobrine smiled and mentioned that before Overwatch's arrival, the overworld had, by Earth standards, 1 hero, and he promised to introduce them to him another time. Later, 𝐀𝐮𝐭𝐡𝐨𝐫 remarked that the earlier events had been surprisingly anticlimactic as he returned to his room. Catherine expressed her excitement about the library as she headed to her own room. Symmetra reminded them to remain cautious, noting that Herobrine had warned that the library was in enemy territory and they might not be welcome there. Winston added that the king had said he would see what he could do but advised them not to get their hopes up for their first visit. As he returned some books to the library, he chuckled to himself, thinking that the Library of Alexandria had been outdone. He couldn't wait for what was to come.